What's up, TikTok? I'm not going to be interacting over here very much. So know that the best place to watch the live today is going to be on my YouTube channel. So hop on there if you want to watch. Good to see everybody. What's going on, everybody? Edit. I think we're live on Instagram. I can't tell, but we'll know shortly. No? All right. Do it this way. Okay. Now I'm live on Instagram. What's going on, everybody? There's a lag in the feed. My hat looks weird. All right. Let's go to the chat. We got, whoa, holy shit. There's so many people in here. Good morning, everyone. We've got, see, wow, Tel Aviv, Yuba City. Hi from the UK. Hi from Alaska. This is super cool. Burbank, Johannesburg. Okay. We are world famous today. So I'm pretty excited about today, guys. There will be, Eric, there will be a replay that happens. I see you. So know that everything we're doing today on this is going to be recorded, and then we're going to drop it into the course framework that I built out for you guys. Remember that this is not just here. So we're going to be doing all of this stuff is going to be put into the course framework. If you're not on, if you're inside of the chat here with us on StreamYard, then you already know. But if not, just know that there is a course framework you can sign up for at thepeopledispleaser.com. And there you'll find all of the written information that's going to look like this. So we are going to be presenting for 4 hours today. I'm going to be taking breaks in between, just kind of get you guys started. And first we'll do kind of a grounding exercise where we get everybody kind of in the mood for this. If you're watching live on TikTok, know that best place to interact is either on Instagram or on YouTube. So we are here and we are ready to do the thing. We got 109 people on now, and I'm hoping that number climbs rapidly. If you are not, if you're not signed up, just go to thepeopledispleaser.com, and that's the best way to do that. So there are going to be exercises that I've built for you guys. We have an entire presentation. I've never done this way before, so I've never presented live online through these mediums, through StreamYard, and through some of this technology. So that's all new to me. And we're gonna learn how to do this together. So all that said, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. You might see my cats come and go throughout the day. So pretty cool. I don't know if that's if you guys can hear me okay, say yes in the chat for me so I can see it. And it sounds like one person said it was a little fuzzy. So, all right, good. So most people are able to hear me. If you're watching on Instagram, the best place to be watching if you want to interact with us through these channels is going to be on YouTube, or you can get in the links and do the thing. So it should be a lot of fun today, though. All right. My TikTok channel's not doing great. Whatever. What are you going to do? So hang on. You guys can help me do this. Can you hear me okay from over here? Say yes if you can hear me from over here. Okay, good. And yes, this will all be recorded. This will all be dropped into the course framework. I'll also be emailing everybody at the end of the day. And we'll be doing more and more as the day goes by. So know that you'll also be getting some emails from me today. We are relaunching our Boundary Bootcamp, which is kind of the master's course on how to stop people pleasing and starting to set boundaries. That's going to be happening as well in the coming week. So start the opening of the cart will be today. And then we'll probably progress into that class, not next week, but the week following, because after all this, I'm going to need a break. So I'm pretty stoked, Brian. Thank you for that. Oh, that's cool. I can show you. Neat. I can do all kinds of cool stuff. Not sure why it's. Some people are saying it's a little buzzy over on YouTube. I don't know. That could be the software. It could be us. But we'll do the best we can. At the moment, we're just trying to get it all figured out. So, all right. Well, without further ado, guys, welcome to Rebellion. This is a course I designed because I've been asked kind of the same questions over and over and over again for the last 2 years. And the challenge is, how do I do that in a meaningful way and kind of do it without all the nuance and without all the need for clarification? So I put this together to try and help everybody get a better grasp on what it means to be a people pleaser and really to understand the differences between, people pleasing and being a jerk, right? Because it's always the common thread in all of this is like, how do I not do one thing when I stop doing the other? So today we're going to start with that. But first I want to do just a little grounding exercise. If you're sitting in your computer or you're sitting at your house, just kind of sit up straight, put your hands on your lap, then just take a deep breath, right? And just kind of be where your feet are. It's actually good for me too. I've been nervous as shit. So just kind of let the thoughts of today just kind of come to you and just kind of dismiss them and let them flow past you. Remember what we're here to do today. It's just get some clarity, feel better about ourselves, start to gain some more confidence. The whole purpose of being here today is to just enjoy our lives a little bit more. And that's why we set all this up. So just take a quick second, take a deep breath. Breathe out really hard. Right? I want you to do that 3 times. So in through your nose, hard out through your mouth. What this does is it helps reset the nervous system, puts you in the moment where you're here in the frame. We're going to do this periodically throughout the day because 4 hours is a hell of a long time to watch me talk. So I'm not going to do a namaste, guys. It's not my way. Right. So The breathing is about as woo-woo as I'm going to get. But what we're practicing in that moment is kind of the silent version of the ki in karate, which means spirit yell. It's to get you into a better frame emotionally, to kind of release all the toxic energy that you've got going on, to let you just kind of be you. So without further ado, looks like we've got 186 people logged on. Looks like Instagram is absolutely crushing it this morning. So here we go. So first thing we want to talk about. Look, guys, I built slides. Hang on. Yeah. So welcome to Rebellion. The whole idea behind this course is built on the resist model, right? So recognize our people-pleasing behaviors, and we want to enhance our self-awareness, which is to start taking control of our lives again through understanding who we are. We want to learn how to start setting some healthy boundaries, right? We're going to do all of that. These first four, we're going to probably try and get out today, and we're going to have a kind of a long day. We're going to move into increasing self-confidence, right? It's a really important section, and I hope you guys stick around for the last part of this today, because it's going to be really important that you understand that part. Because when we move into strengthening assertiveness, having the confidence to do that is going to be massively important, right? And then finally, we're going to learn about how do we start to take control of our own lives. Does it mean that we have to end some relationships? Does it mean that we have to start some relationships? Do we need to start looking for more reciprocal cooperative relationships, right? These are all components of what it means to be in personal growth. And I have a fundamental belief that the personal growth field has lately been more in the vein of it's this idea that you have to be on the extremes of everything in order to be effective even a little bit, right? So if you're not going 100 miles an hour and running 50 miles in the middle of the night, and I love Goggins, but who's going to carry the boats? I don't care about who's carrying the boats, right? I care about, is my life progressing in a meaningful way? And a lot of that's done in the middle. So this whole idea of taking control, which is the final thing within the structure, is what does it mean for you to start taking control of your life? No matter where you are. Does it mean you need to make $5,000 more a year? Does it mean you need to figure out a side hustle? Does it mean that you need to end a relationship? Does it mean you need to just have some hard conversations with people? All of that stuff leads to massive growth. But if you don't do that component first and understand what you're shooting at, then there's really nowhere to go, right? So that take control component is going to be really cool, and it's going to be really a lot of fun. So in terms of course structure, we're going to be doing 2 hours kind of straight here from 10 to noon my time. And then right after that, I'm going to eat lunch at my desk, and I'm going to answer questions as best I can while I try and devour a sandwich if I'm hungry. I've got plenty of coffee. I'm going to be taking coffee breaks because that's who I am. I've got my water, and I'm ready to go. If you're watching us on TikTok, please go over to our YouTube channel. That's the best place to watch this. And without anything else, I think let's just go ahead and get started with recognizing our people-pleaser behaviors, right? So I put this as tactics and behaviors of the people pleaser for a very specific reason. The reason I call it a tactic is because one of the things that we know about people-pleasing behavior is that it is inherently manipulative. Now, it's not to say that everyone in here is a manipulative person, right? But the behavior itself is a manipulative behavior. And the reason it is because we're constantly trying to get validation and trying to get our needs met by giving to other people, right? And the way this shows up is very often through procrastination, right? And submission to other people's opinions. So when I say submission to other people's opinions, it means that we end up procrastinating by getting data, right? We'll say, for instance, like if you're trying to decide on the car you want to buy, you'll get 17,000 different opinions on how you do that, right? Jay Turner from Huntington Beach, California. I think I know who you are. It shows up in relationship problems. Very often, one of the side effects is that it disconnects us from our same-sex friendships, right? So when we're seeking validation, we have a tendency to do it from the opposite sex, and this crosses all really sexual modalities, whether you're gay or you're straight or what. It doesn't really matter. We tend to find that we're looking for validation very often from women, which ends up disconnecting us in the whole. Right? Because the validation seeking is a very kind of feminine based energy. whereas the masculine energy is more out seeking to validate itself, right? All of that puts us in this place where we're very much living in fear, right? And we end up always keeping the peace, right? So you're probably noticing a vein here that every one of these is sort of an outward focused modality, right? And kind of keep that in mind as we talk through it, because when we start to be less pleasing or we become less agreeable, we're actually focusing slightly more inward and we're taking better control of our own lives, right? Which is why conflict avoidance also tends to show up, right? I did a video back in 21 that said that people pleasers are like mini volcanoes, right? And we're constantly suppressing our emotions and suppressing our emotions. And then we become unstable and we end up blowing up at the people around us, and whether it was their fault or not. So these little offenses can turn into big offenses. And then we end up having these conversations about like, how do I set a boundary with my mom, which I don't understand. You don't set your boundaries with your mom, you set your boundaries within you, right? And these blowups can be completely avoided if you just have more conflict, not less. You know, fascinatingly, that's one of the challenges with people pleasing. At least it was in my own life, where I would bury almost everything in terms of conflict. Like I would let people just run all over me, and it would destroy like my confidence. It would destroy my self-esteem, and it would make me unhappy to even really be existing, because I couldn't ever express what was really up with me. Right. So conflict avoidance is such a massive component, because when you start to learn to be honest, which I've said this in videos as well, that people pleasing is kind of an inherently dishonest way of living your life, then you start to take back control, right? You lose control of everything outside of you, but you gain control of yourself, right? The covert contracts idea actually comes to me from Dr. Robert Glover. He wrote the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm presently in his certified coaching program as well. But it's the idea of giving to get. And a covert contract in people pleasers sounds very, very much like this. It's like, if I make everyone around me happy, then I will be loved and accepted, and I will get my needs met. And if you're in this room right now, you're probably thinking to yourself, yeah, but that never works, right? And you're right, it doesn't work, because you are responsible for making sure your needs get met, right? And when you start taking responsibility for that component, those contracts start to disappear, and you start to understand that like healthy people ask for what they want. I know that's fascinating to most people to hear, but it doesn't always mean you'll get it, but it does mean that if you want your life to go the way you want it to go, then you're going to have to ask for it. And very often you're going to have to take control and be responsible for it, right? So the repressed emotions component of people pleasing is really fascinating. When I see people pleasing in men and in women, very often there's a sexual component of shame that exists, because all of this is built around a toxic shame framework, right? So this repressed emotion idea, what you repress will express itself somehow, some way, eventually, right? So in in sexual dysfunction, this could be through porn, it could be through having an affair, it could be could be emotional affairs. It's one of my favorites of the people pleaser set, and I'm guilty of if I say it in this course, guys, by the way, I'm guilty of it. I have done everything that can possibly be imagined wrong to my life, and I have managed to fix it. So welcome to my siren song. Anyway, those repressed emotions very often show up as chronic anxiety, which we're now seeing is kind of the next bullet point here. Because you're constantly in a state of dishonesty, you end up creating around you worlds that can't be sustained, right? So you're constantly in a fear of loss, and you're constantly feeling like you have to hide who you are, which then creates this massive disconnect between what's real and what isn't, right? And because you don't have any stability in your own framework and your own emotional frame, you end up often doing things that you wouldn't do. This very often happens in the form of secrets and hidden behaviors. I don't know why that part got moved over, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So when we talk about secrets and hidden behaviors, we're going to talk more about shame. But if you think of, I want you to think of a moment in recent weeks where you felt a deep sense of shame, and then what did you do to hide that from everyone around you, right? Um, Very often for me, this showed up as compartmentalization. So in the terms of an emotional affair, we're very good at this compartmentalized feature, in that we'll say, I didn't sleep with them, so it wasn't actually an affair. When we'd wake up every day, and that would be who we would talk to, or any number of terrible things we could do to our partners, we do, whether it's lack of emotional connection, or whether it's use of pornography. This very often shows up in terms of secrets and hidden behavior as addiction. I see this a lot with people who use and consume a lot of alcohol, which all of these lead to this idea of self-sabotage, right? And not living up to our true potential. The people pleaser is very often more afraid of success than they are of failure. They just don't realize it. So when you think of another one from Huntington Beach, California, when you think of self-sabotage and not living up to your potential, this is the effort that you make to take away your own successes, right? And usually we do it not because we don't like ourselves, although that does often show up, but because we're so afraid of being noticed and seen, that we pull ourselves back, or we pull our punches, to make our lives seem easier, right? Or to be less afraid of what's going on in our lives. Real quick note to the Instagram channel. I see all of your comments, and I'm so grateful for you being here. Please, if you want to interact with us, hop on the YouTube channel. That's the best place to pick us up. Or to comment, if you want to comment, please hop over there. Which then brings us to this overwhelming lack of purpose, right? There's really nothing worse in a pleaser's life than having zero purpose, right? And what we see in that is this kind of a lot of statements around, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I like, and overall, it's just another set of ways that you end up feeling less passionate about who you are. So when we think about the consequences, I'll go through this in just a second, but I'm curious, in the chat thread, which one of those behaviors, if you go back to the list here, which one of these shows up the most for you? Is it conflict avoidance? Is it procrastination? You have problems in relationships and connecting from friends? The only purpose of the people pleaser is to please others. Chad, you're not wrong about that. And it's such an empty feeling when it doesn't work, right? Conflict avoidance, conflict avoidance, conflict avoidance. Holy crap. All right, show. Yeah, look at that. Conflict avoidance is winning the day so far. Lack of purpose is another big one. There we go. So conflict avoidance, all the secretive behaviors, the self-sabotage. Wow. Right. So keep these in mind, guys, because at the end of this section, we're going to go through and you're going to have an exercise that I want you to do, that you can download inside of the course framework. And it will help you to start to flesh out some of this stuff and get an idea of what you're working with. All right. Lack of purpose, hidden behaviors. Look at that. My goodness. Well, hey, guys, the good news is we're all in this together, and we're all a mess. So congratulations to all of us, right? Next, depends on safety and connection. That's interesting. So this is a really interesting point in that covert contracts. I'm interested about this one, Susan. That's an interesting comment. Heck yeah, all of them. Adam's like, I'm screwed, bro. This is much easier to interact. Really glad about that. So I want to move on to the next slide, but I want to clear up the first misconception around people pleasing before we do that. So let's do that first. I'm going to move my chair. So The purpose of this course is pretty simple. I want you to be able to stop people pleasing without being a jerk, right? And the key to that is to understand that jerk and people pleaser exist on the same through line. So what do I mean by that? So when people ask me, they say the same words. They're like, "Hey Nick, I want to stop people pleasing, but I'm afraid it'll turn me into an asshole." Right? The challenge is that you're trying to find the tipping point between two toxic extremes. Right? When we think of it in this context, neither one of these are great options. Right? And the most important thing that you can recognize probably today out of this class is that we're not trying to stay here. We're trying to move here. Right? This line represents integration. Okay? We don't want to be a jerk. We don't want to be a people pleaser. We don't want to find a balance between being an asshole and not. Which is this terrible arrow. Jesus. All right. When we move up to integration, above this line exists all the things you like about you. Okay? So a jerk can be a narcissist, sure. I think the word narcissist is wildly overused. It's like I've met a million people who tell me that their exes are narcissists, and I go, "Is that true, or you just have no boundaries and you're a people pleaser?" Right? So there is a vast difference between those two things. Sociopathy is another one that's getting used a lot. Probably not accurate in most cases. And the issue is with an idea like that is, you can't just assign toxicity in terms of logo to people because it's very often not true, right? So here's something that's very interesting. So when we're at the integrated line, remember, this is our current through line, okay? People pleaser or jerk or narcissist or whatever, right? Pick a thing. You call it whatever you like, okay? Above this integration line exists things like kindness, honesty, integrity, discipline, okay? These are the things that we already have as people pleasers, but they're presently just being misused and miscategorized, right? So I hear a lot of people, by the way, Sarah, you can't be both a narcissist and a people pleaser. Stop kicking your own ass. If that was going to work, it would have worked already. Yes, it's going to be recorded. So honesty, kindness, integrity, and discipline exist above this through line. When we're talking about people pleasing, right, we have to add in some of these things, right? We want to delete this behavior. We want to delete being a jerk. We want to delete being a people pleaser and move up to another level, right? So we're seeking a higher vibrational frequency. And in that, we'll have like a happy, kind of well-adjusted human. Yay! Right? Because when we're here, we're different. Okay? The idea is through this arc of a story, we stop taking away from ourselves all the things that we need, right? So down here, we have conflict avoidance, we have dishonesty, we have all this kind of other mucky nonsense on both sides of this scale, right? So if you think of what we hear about a narcissist, we always hear that they're dishonest and that they're manipulative. Well, yeah, and they exist on the same through line as people pleasers, right? Which is why so many people pleasers get mistaken for narcissists. You can see my face. There we go. That's better. That's why so many people pleasers get mistaken for narcissists, right? Because there's so many traits that are the same, right? Covert contracts, very high in narcissism. They're also both very self-focused. So we're talking about modalities of living that are both not functional and good for you, right? Poppy, to your point, yes, narcissistic personality disorder does require professional diagnosis, right? And most people aren't going to get diagnosed, right? So in this vein, something I want you to remember, and I'll keep saying it throughout this course as I see you guys talking shit about yourselves, is like if kicking your own ass was going to work, it would have worked already. So maybe let's try something else, right? If trying to find the balance between people pleasing and being a jerk was going to work, it would have worked already. So let's try and find something else. Sorry, I'm getting some more light here. So this is the first most important component that you have to understand. Okay. This misconception is the killer among people who try and get boundaries. Like if I try to set boundaries, I'm going to turn into a jerk or people won't like it, right? And this is another kind of component of this that you have to understand, right? So if we look at where you are, right, in terms of your life, you have 0 boundaries now, 0 boundaries. And you think everybody in your life is just going to like react like properly to all of this without any sort of change or without any notification or without any of you giving grace, you're out of your mind, right? So to start doing this, you have to understand that like your friendships are going to decline a little bit initially. Okay, so we'll call this friendships, right? Or we'll just go with relationships in general. Relationships. By the way, my handwriting sucks, so it's a free course though. I don't need it. So your relationships right now are kind of here, and they're going to decline a little. This might mean that you have less of them in some regard, but it also could mean that like the quality of them is going to decline a bit, right? And that's okay, because this lonely point that you're going to get to in that decline kind of levels out. As you start to be less pleasing, as you start to go down the road of like, I'm going to start prioritizing myself, this is what will happen. Okay. This has happened for every single person I've worked with, every one of my one-on-one coaching clients, every single person in my boundary boot camps, right? This isn't because these people are terrible. Okay. And in fact, some of these folks, like put in, 4 lines here, 1 or 2 of these will return to you, right? They just have to adjust to the new version of you, right? But you have to go through this section here of loneliness, which sounds really, really scary until you realize the power that's in that process. Okay. Being lonely is a component of all of this, right? Because here, this kind of downslide gives you a chance to figure out who you are. There is massive freedom in loneliness. You don't have to ask people's permission to do anything. You don't have to like worry about opinions of other people. You can just start doing you and figuring out the people that actually work with you, right? So as you do this, you go from this was where you were trying to fit in. This is where you're going to start to belong. Okay, this upslide happens 3 to 4 months, but this is where you start to belong in your social circle. Okay. Now the interesting thing is I don't plateau that line, because the longer you work on this, the more reciprocal relationships you're going to your cooperative reciprocal relationships you'll create, and the easier your life will become in terms of your friendships and how you experience other people, right? So for many of you, this is and I love this quote. Like I just saw this one from Toby. I appreciate you, brother. It's like taking your power back. Okay, sure, you're taking your power back, but for many of you, you never had the power to begin with, right? So this is about self-invention rather than being about self-discovery, right? Take my power back says that I lost it somehow. Some of us never had it, but you also never really lost your power. You just lost the thread of how to make decisions, right? People pleasing is not about, we always say it's about making other people happy. It's not. It's about protecting ourselves from making other people unhappy. It's a huge difference, right? A massive misconception among our peers. People pleasing is about making sure nobody else is unhappy. It has nothing to do with whether they're happy or not. Because people pleasing, by its definition, is an inability to tolerate normal emotions. That's what this is. Okay? People pleasing is an inability to tolerate normal negative emotions in other people, right? Because we take those as a sign that we'll either be abandoned or nobody loves us or we're not going to get a validation or we're not going to get our needs met, right? By the way, this is not my quote. Shout out to Mel, whatever her name is, Mel Blondley, talks about count five. An inability to tolerate normal negative emotions, meaning think of the last time. Yeah, there it is. Shelly's right here with me, right? I hate bad feelings. Mel Robbins, that's who it is. Thanks, Toby. To be able to tolerate them. Otherwise, we end up making our lives miserable. I can't get Shelly off the screen now. There she is. So I lived like this most of my life. Conan, you are a commenter, and I love it. And thank you all for the comments on Mel. If you know her, just tell her I said hi. That said, when we think about our inability to tolerate these normal emotions, how does it show up, right? Well, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to avoid conflict, right? You're always going to say yes. You're always going to be in positions that you're unhappy. You're going to go on things you don't want to go on. You're never going to stand up for yourself, right? So when we think of this, right, how does it sabotage other things, right? I just saw a great, one of you guys just said something really profound, okay? We need the negatives to appreciate the positive. The fascinating thing about this idea is how overused it is, but how accurate it is even still, right? One of the things people seem to hate right now is like, there's the one that I hear a lot of is, well, I guess you're just saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah, man, like nobody else is going to do it for you. So you're just going to have to take responsibility and do the thing, right? But in this case, we do need the negatives to appreciate the positive, right? I live by an interesting code in that I kind of think that we're born to die and we're born to get our hearts broken because everything in between that, like, so I have an amazing cat around here somewhere. I have two of them and I love them to death and I'm going to love them every day until they die. And when they die, I'm going to be fucking miserable. I'm going to be absolutely devastated. Right? And when we're thinking about that, that means that I have to experience the pain. Right? And will I ever get another cat? Probably. Right? Will I be sad in that moment? 100%. Right? It's the challenge of understanding that this is normal. Right. Laura said it exactly. I enjoyed the cat. That's why it hurts. Right? I hear a lot of people say, I can't believe my relationship ended. But yeah, you had a great time though. Right? And so often when we think about it in terms of that, you know, what then becomes possible? If we can just accept that there's going to be suffering, how much more do we get to love the moments that are amazing? So all that said, plot twist, people pleaser with ADHD actually diagnosed uses conflict avoidance as a dopamine fix too. People pleasers with ADHD do tend to create drama. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. So all of that said, that's what we're looking at when we're talking about people pleasing, right? So I won't have a victimizer to justify my habits. I don't know what that means, Sebastian, but okay. So let me get that out of the way and get back to where we were. Which brings us to, what are the consequences of people pleasing, right? There's going to be an exercise shortly after this that I want you guys to take on. How do I do this? There we go. All right. So when we think of the consequences, right? There's so many. And I saw these manifest a lot in my own life. I was going to read all this stuff to you, but I think the thing I really want to do is just tell you what went on for me, right? So when we think about increased stress and anxiety, I spent an entire lifetime trying to create this version of me that I thought was going to make everybody around me happy, right? And what that ended up doing was I was like constantly worried about losing this status that I had made that I didn't even really want, right? So I had all this stress around being the corporate executive or being this thing or that thing. And the reality was I didn't want any of that, right? I've always been kind of a person that marched to the beat of my own drum. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to do what I do now, right? And I think the hardest part was understanding that my anxiety and stress were results of my own choices to make other people happy or to try and gain acceptance and get my needs met, right? And that led me to this massive level of burnout, right? Because I was giving myself away in every endeavor and none of it was what I wanted to be. Um, and interestingly, that's a great comment. I'll get to that one in a second, Emma. But um, and burnout showed up for me in a lot of ways. It showed up for me in alcoholism. It showed up for me in drug addiction. It showed up for me in 3 divorces, and because I had nothing left to give, because I had built this entire life around, what does everybody else think I should do? Who does everybody else think I should be? And the reality was I was miserable, right? And I had no identity of my own. Um, and I'd completely lost my own identity, right? So when I say that, like, there's a loss of identity, I literally used to feel like I didn't even know what I liked, right? Um, Hi, Laura. Yes, you can access the recordings after the course today. But I really didn't even know what I liked, and and it made me really sad because I had all these friends that had all these really cool hobbies, and I felt like I could never do that. And it brought me to this place, and I bet everybody's asked this question, like, when is it my turn, right? And I thought, like, I resented other people, but I didn't. I really resented myself. Um, I felt alone all the time, right? And it didn't matter who I was with. It didn't matter. It didn't. It didn't matter how much I loved the people I was hanging out with. It didn't matter whether I was bowling or whether I was playing pickleball or surfing. I just always felt alone, and that I could never be who I wanted to be, right? And when you feel alone, not lonely but alone, right? Feeling lonely I can deal with, right? Feeling alone, right, creates a massive impact on what you believe you're about, right? Because I had all of this. Lonely equals freedom. At least I hear where you're at, and I appreciate you being positive. But um, there is a huge freedom in being lonely, right? But it's really challenging to develop a sense of self and sense of self-esteem when you constantly feel like you don't even know what you're good at or what you want, right? Um, and it left me kind of in this lost space all the time, where I didn't know if I could even get up, and I didn't know if I didn't know that I could even be who I wanted to be, let alone could I figure out who that was, right? And because of that, that's kind of another component of why I had no boundaries, is because I had all this difficulty around, how do I make people like me? How do I not feel this awful thing anymore, right? Um, and I would get to a place. When I say lack of boundaries, a lot of people say, "Yeah, I'm tired of getting taken advantage of." My answer to that is almost universally, when we're talking about ineffective or lack of boundaries, it's like, well, then stop giving, right? And that doesn't mean be an asshole. It just means put some boundaries around your giving. Learn to say no, right? And it creates, I don't know. I think the lack of boundaries is very often just the lack of boundaries in yourself, right? And then, obviously poor decision making, right? I was making all of my choices based on other people's expectations rather than my personal values and needs, right? And when I stopped doing that and I hadn't integrated, I hadn't gone from, I hadn't leveled up, like I mentioned, where we're going from like people pleaser to, shithead. Because I hadn't gone up that level yet into this kind of integrated phase of me and gotten off that through line, I would always have these huge regrets, right? And so I stopped giving and started saying, well, I'll just be an asshole, right? And in between these two lines, before I started to integrate, of course, was where I found myself falling into addiction, right? So there we go. Sorry, forgot to switch the camera view. So in between those through lines is where I found myself in addiction. So addiction very often happens in this field, right? So yes, this will be available later, guys. So this is all being recorded. You'll get an email at the end of the day. So I want to answer that question too. Is it about attracting the wrong people too? I constantly get confirmed that my no would not be accepted. I can say so yes, it is partly that. If your no's not being accepted, you probably are with the wrong people, right? Like everybody's allowed to say no. And you have to understand that component of yourself. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the sauce every single time, right? So, wow, there are a ton of you on Instagram. Thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate you. All that said, as I think through the slides here, let me go back to that. There we go. What are some ways that you can look at this if you're in the chat thread or just thinking about it? Like, pick one of these and tell me in the chat thread, like, what showed up for you first that caused you to want to start dealing with this? Is it the anxiety and the stress or the identity? Did you have addiction start to show up? Like, what went on for you? Because I think it's important that, as we do this course, that I interact with you and we have a little fun with this, but also, it becomes a lot more fun. Burnout, loss of identity. Okay, so if you have a pen and a piece of paper, I want you to write down how burnout has shown up consistently throughout your life. I want you to write how poor decision making has shown up consistently throughout your life. Right? If you're taking notes, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, is just to start to interact with the content, because it's going to make a big difference. Right? So more consequences of the people pleasing, inauthentic relationships, right? I used to say, one of the hardest things I ever realized is I never got invited to barbecues. And even now when I talk about it, it still kind of hurts my feelings. Like, I never got invited to barbecues, right? I was constantly neglecting my own needs. I was constantly neglecting my own health. I was constantly neglecting everything around me and prioritizing everybody. And I was never getting invited to go to, the fun stuff, the birthday parties, right? And it becomes really, really painful, right? And because I never said no to anything, I always felt like I was doing everything for other people. And then I ended up completely fatigued, emotionally suppressed, and I had no personal time. Like, you can literally see how this plays out. Right. And then it goes right back to this slide where you end up with increased anxiety and burnout. Right. So, Brian, this is a really interesting point. I have resentment against my daughter and her husband for walking all over my generosity. Is that a them problem or is that a you problem? In that, maybe stop giving so generously. Right. Generosity is allowed in the integrated phase of you, right? This line of integration. Let me put the screen back up, right? So that's allowed in this line of integration. Going back to my original. So if we're integrated, we're allowed to be generous. But we also have boundaries. Right? So is it really that you're resentful of them, right? Or is it that you resent you? When you really start to put it into practice and you start to think about it, it changes the mentality, right? So that's it for this section of the course this morning. So what are the consequences of people pleasing? We've covered quite a lot of information. What I want you to do now is, if you're in the course framework, there's an exercise that's within there. I'm going to pull it up myself right now. And let's see. I'll show you where it is. So if you go to the course framework, that if you signed up, you should have a membership. I wonder how many of you have gone in there. Are you being good boys and girls? Are you being good students? It's got 1,500 members. Holy shit, you guys did a lot, right? Consequences, and then we have assessments, right? So there are 2 assessments in there. The first one is called the consequences of people pleasing, right? In that assessment, we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. It's a PDF that I want you to go download. Let me get back out of this thing. Consequences. There it is. So I want you to go in and download this PDF. It's going to ask you some questions that are very important, and give you some. Actually, you know what? Skip that one. Go to the identifying people pleaser patterns section. Forgive me. Again, this is a new course, so I'm going to unpublish that one. But if you go in there, you'll be able to download this assessment, right? It's going to give you an idea of what it looks like for you to be a people pleaser. It's actually it's not graded by us anyway. What you'll do, Laura, it is. Did you guys find it? Hang on. There's no cost to any of that. There shouldn't be. Hold, please. I'm working this out. Let me get rid of consequences of people pleasing as an assessment. There we go. So there's one called Assessment Identifying People Pleaser Patterns, right? I'll post it here in the thread. Just get a copy of it again, and I'll just bring it in so you guys can see it. There it is. Well, save. All right. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. And present. Screen. Oh. All right. I can't figure out how to do that. I'm not technologically, sound enough to figure this out. But what I will do is point it out to you. So if you go into the course framework, you're going to see it. It's under assessments. And it reads, Assessment Identifying People Pleaser Patterns. I want you to take that assessment briefly here. And I'm going to take a quick coffee break while I go and do my own thing here. And then we will come back in about 10 minutes. So watching the live stream. So you're going to need to go to the course framework to get this, by the way, guys. It's going to be thepeopledispleaser.com. You should have gotten a login. There's a welcome email that came. And that will be where you go and log in for this. I can also email it out to everybody. Let me do that. Let me just do that. Hang on. Bert Kits. Give me a second. I'm just going to send it out. So you're going to get an email from me in about 2 seconds. It's going to have this attachment. And by the way, guys, I really appreciate you being patient with me. This is a new way of doing things for me. So new broadcast. And my computer's running slow because I'm streaming. Attached is the assessment. People user assessment. Could just send you the link too, but this time I'm going to send you the attachment. Link, layout, file. All right. So the assessment is on its way. Hopefully you get it. Like I said, if not, just go to thepeopledispleaser.com and click on the login that was sent to you. There should be a welcome email that you received, and that will have all of the information that you need. And image. There we go. All right. So email is sent with the assessment. If you're on the email list, then you'll get it. If you're not, you won't. So subscribe to, no, hang on. All right. It's there. Good. So I sent everybody out the assessment. Thank you, Laura, for posting the link. We do that too. So Laura's posted the link, boundarybootcamp.app.clienthub.net.home /home. Hopefully we'll be able to clear that up in the coming weeks here, so you guys can actually see it. So I had a yes on every single question. Jesus. That is a bummer. So Aaron, I went ahead and sent out the link again. And how about now? Right? Maybe there's no attachment. Damn it. I am just doing the thing today. Hang on. I'm going to duplicate. One more time. Here we go. Make sure it gets attached. File. Upload. Open. I may have gone too fast for it. There it is. Continue. Send email. Continue workshop. Send broadcast. Try now. So Jamie, the thing you have to do is go to thepeopledispleaser.com, and you're going to want to sign up for the course. You'll also get a welcome email that will send you through all this stuff. Thanks, Laura. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate the comments, guys. It's been a long couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun for me, but at the same time, it's been kind of exhausting. So hopefully this all keeps going the way we we want it to go, right? So I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. I wonder if I can say that. Hang on. There's got to be a way. There we go. Coffee break. Stand by. Be right back. Coffee's brewing. And we're back. Lost a few. That's all right. Okay. How did you guys do on the assessment that I emailed out? No, you don't need to pay anything, guys. I don't know what's going on with that. 31 on the assessment. So there's two things. Very high, very high. Laura, I might make you an administrator if you keep being this helpful. Bunch of high scores. I recognize most of the patterns, right? So most of you wouldn't be here talking to me or watching me do this if there was no reason for it, right? Mine is high. I feel like the test attacked me. I'm making that so everybody can see it. Mike, you can go to. You should have just gotten an email from me. If you're in the StreamYard, that means you just got an email. It might have gone to your spam, but there's a PDF in there that'll give you the idea of what you can do. Almost 100%. So I feel like the test attacked me. That's funny. That's a really interesting comment, Annie. That's really cool. I mean, it's not great for you, of course. It's kind of a bummer, but realistically, it's good that you recognize it because then you can do something about it, right? 37, 42. Yeah. Right. So what we're talking about is, a true assessment of what does it look like to be a people pleaser, and are you on that, spectrum, for lack of a better term? Sounds like it. Sounds like many of you are, and it's actually probably pretty good news, guys. For a lot of reasons. One of the main ones, of course, being that now you can see it, right? And there's ways to work on it, and through understanding some of this stuff, you'll be able to work on those things one by one, right? So, I see many of those. Yeah, 24 points. Hey, you're one of the lower ones. Good for you. Oh, I got to take the coffee break off there. Manners. There we go. Hide. Show. Huzzah. I did it. Guys, great comments. I appreciate everything that you guys are saying too. It's this is a challenge for people. Like, we're talking about growth. We're talking about changing the way we show up. Revenge bedtime procrastination. Interesting. So, well, I mean, you can't be off the charts, Al. There's only one chart, unless you gave yourself extra credit. Oh, look at you! You're overachieving. Giselle crushing it. So it's really important. The reason the assessment was put in there, I mean, I love that. Some of the funny comments, of course, that you feel like the test attacked you, but it's really important to recognize these behaviors, because once you start to get an idea of how they show up, then you can start to deal with them, right? People talk about changing their habits all the time, but not a lot of people actually do it, because what ends up happening, not a lot of people actually do it, because what ends up happening is they try and focus on too many things at once. So if you scored really, really high on this, that's really good news. It means you have a lot of cool things to choose from in terms of how you work. So what I would suggest that you do is pick one of those habits that you know is particularly challenging for you, and then address it, right? Just go one by one, point by point. Would you believe me if I said 1 point? No, I wouldn't. But address each habit one by one, and then start to move down the list. Pick the one that you feel like is the least challenging and solve it, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. It's very much like paying off your credit card debt. Like, pick the small one and then work your way up to the big ones, right? Let's see. Daisy, fear not, by the way, guys. This will be right. It says at the bottom of the screen, all this is going to be recorded, and activities. You can register for all of this at thepeopledispleaser.com. And hopefully it makes a big difference for you. So moving on, let's move into our next section here. You guys want me to make myself a little bigger in this? I can do that. Hang on. Hit it. Move me over here. No. How about that? Let's see. There, I'm a little bigger. How about that? So made myself slightly larger so you can see more of me than you were. I think what I'll do, here's an idea. Wait a tick. Let's see. I wonder if I do. No, I don't love that. Screw it. Can't win everything. It's not going to be perfect today. It's the first time for everything, right? So here we are. It's bigger. It's me. I'm on the screen. Yo. Could also do something like this. Nah, then you can't see the thing. All right. So anyway, moving on. Enhancing self-awareness. Sadly, but not unexpected, I have the 48. The test scores are the test scores, guys. The good news is that you're in good company again, and just by virtue of not being alone in this fight and knowing that there are other people that are right here with you playing along. Oh, Lisa, you think you're funny? Yes, I am. Trying to please the algorithm gods, I guess. So I want to talk about self-awareness in this next section, right? Special thanks to my friend Morgan, who helped me put this section together. She's probably going to teach it next time. But when we talk about mindfulness and we talk about self-awareness, they're kind of in the same vein, right? You need to be aware of the present moment, your bodily sensations, your thoughts, your feelings, and all of your emotions, right? Well, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And when you kind of combine that with your relationship with yourself, it's the capacity of you to give and accept kindness and compassion to yourself, right? You have to be capable of achieving all of that, right? To behave genuinely and independently of everyone else, right? So one of the things that I want to show you is how this shows up. Let me do this first, though. Right. Okay. So here are the principles of mindfulness, right? This comes to us by John Zinn, Dr. John Zinn, right? So when we think of mindfulness, we want to think of being non-judgmental. We want to think of being a beginner, right? So everything is a process at the start, right? You have to learn to trust yourself. You're not striving for anything in mindfulness, right? You're trying to be patient, accept knowledge as it shows up, and then just letting go and letting things be, right? I want to show you something that's not within this scope that's really important first. This is kind of how emotional intelligence works, right? So when you think of being mindful of your body and your emotions, okay, we have kind of three sections that all play together. We have, by the way, I have terrible handwriting and I draw terrible circles, and they're not going to be exactly right. So you're all on the same page, right? So inside of our emotional intelligence, we have our mind, our body, and our emotions. Inside of the people-pleasing framework, the mind, body, and emotions are really important, right? Because here's what happens, right? Mike doesn't look like any face. Well, yeah, of course not. I guess I probably need to figure out how to fix that next time, but whatever. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, we have our mind, our body, and emotions, okay? This section right here where mind and body intersect, this is known as our danger zone. Okay, this is where people pleasing happens. Okay, so danger zone, right? Like Kenny Loggins or Archer, whichever you prefer, for both. I want you to think of the last time that you thought you were going to die. Mark Greenall, there he is. If you don't know Mark, he is instrumental in my work and has been one of the greatest students I think I've ever had. I'm so glad to see you here, brother. Thank you for coming. So when we think of our body and our emotions, right, and how they function, who wasn't thinking danger zone? Some of these comments are cracking me up. You guys are making this much more fun than it's supposed to be. I thought this was going to be really challenging. So think of the last time you thought you were going to die. I want you to remember that feeling specifically, right? Right in the gut, right? Or maybe it's in your chest, or maybe it's in your neck or your head, right? How does it show up, right? You want to point to that emotion, right? What you're experiencing there is the same feeling you very likely get when you feel like somebody doesn't like you. That's my mommy. um, that one. So my mom showed up to the call. So when we think about how this shows up, right? You've got this heart feeling, right? Whether it's in the chest or in the neck or in the head or in the feet or wherever you get. Like some people get really hot, right? Some people, however you feel negative emotion. Whenever you feel like you're about to step into a people pleasing frames, that's where that's going to show up, right? So slammed into the road from a horse, couldn't even breathe enough to cry. Right, Giselle, this is interesting. I want you to think of the lower level of this feeling. I know that was an extremely high level of fear, right? But when we talk about the next level below that, that's very often what you're going to feel is that emotion afterward that's around this people pleasing behavior. The body doesn't lie, right? So here is where we feel that, right? And what's happening is your body is having an emotion. What I'm describing to you right now is that your body feels the feeling first, and I'm going to explain. Because if you think about the last time that you felt like you were in love or you were excited about something or you were nervous in a positive way, chances are the emotion was identical. Chances are the feeling in your body was identical. So, or very, very close, right? So when, and Conan, you said this really well, it's a visceral fear of potential loss, right? You literally go into your lizard brain, which is where this exists. Okay. In the addict, this shows up as a relapse. This is 100% of the time where relapses come from. Okay. This is literally the most dangerous place you can be. It's also very often one of the happiest places you can be. Okay. So remember that if this is what causes alcoholics and addicts to relapse, this is very often the same problem that we have in people pleasing. Okay. Why do addicts and alcoholics act the way they act? Is it because they're addicted? Sure. But it's actually the same reasons that we people please, and it is to manage toxic shame. That's it. Still with me? I bet you are. You're going, oh shit, how much shame am I actually carrying around with me? Right? Overeating, same thing. Okay. Marsha, that's a really good point. Food very often can be an addiction. Okay. So when you think of how a relapse shows up, this is the same thing. You're trying to manage the same thing, right? You don't want to feel whatever this is. Right? Again, if we go back to the definition of what people pleasing is, it is an inability to feel normal negative emotions or to process normal negative emotions. Okay. Here's how we fix it. You have to engage your mind to complete the circuit. Okay. Very often we can do that by asking a question. In the case of the people pleaser, we have to learn to say no. Right? It doesn't have to be no for a long time, right? But it can be a no, it can be a give me a minute, it can be a lot of things, right? But the question you want to ask yourself in this moment to engage your brain is, what am I believing? Right? Just by virtue of asking this question, you are engaging your mind and you are starting to short out this feeling, right? So you see this in the positive. You see this in romantic relationships where we sabotage the kiss, right? Like if you think you're going to kiss somebody and then you speak, right? Or you ask a question like, huh, because you're afraid, right? Same thing happens here. But what am I believing? Right? Then you have to ask yourself another question, which is going to ask the mind to go back to the emotions. What are you doing that's reinforcing this belief system? By the way, these questions will be emailed out. I email them out about once a month anyway. But what am I doing that reinforces this belief system? Right. So in the case of the addict, it's very often, I'm a piece of shit. That's usually how they describe it. It's almost always the same. Okay. So when we're talking about relapse, we're talking about I'm a piece of shit. Then you say, okay, how am I reinforcing that belief system? Okay, well, I called my dealer. I'm going to the bar. I'm at a liquor store, whatever the case is. Right. Next question. What do I want to believe? Right. Okay. So now we've got the emotions asking the mind. Okay, well, I hear it. What do we want to believe? Right. I want to believe I'm the opposite of a piece of shit. So probably I want to feel good about myself. Right. Which means I then have to ask one more question, which is what action do I need to take immediately to do that? Which then engages the body. So this is where emotional intelligence creates a loop, right? And here we have a flow state, okay, or harmony, right? You've managed the toxic shame by asking yourself the proper questions and engaging the mind so all of this can start to go away. But if you do this well, okay, then you start to be able to say no, you start to be able to set boundaries, you start to be okay when people are disappointed with you, right? I've often said that people pleasers don't have a problem saying no. They have a problem with not saying yes. Right? Because you're so used to doing it one way and you keep doubling down on that and it's making you fucking miserable. So that's how that looks in terms of emotional awareness. All right. We're going back to where we were. Okay. So what I just showed you is a guide to how you start letting go of negative emotion. Okay. You have to understand that when your body and your emotions are playing in concert together without your mind, you are disrupting an entire thought pattern. Okay. They have proven through many, many years of research that the emotional center is where we make most of our decisions. And very often it's wrong. And that's why we need to engage our decision-making process. We actually have to have our intellect and our emotions to make proper decisions, right? Where people pleasers get hung up is in that danger zone experience where they get fearful, they get afraid, and then they make a decision based purely on emotion, right? So going back to emotional intelligence, right? This is self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management, right? To manage yourself in the awareness, to manage yourself in the actions, right? All of this comes down to these first two here, right? Self-management and self-awareness. This is where I need you focused for the most part right now, okay? Because relationship management will come, social awareness will come, but you have to be connected to you before you can manage those other things. So, my assistant Morgan put this together for us. When we're thinking about trains of thought, right? So imagine sitting in a train station. Each train that goes by is a thought that pops up in your mind. You get to choose which train of thought you want to hop on every single time it shows up, right? But ultimately, watching them pass is where you find peace. So what does this mean? This is where we see value in meditation. This is where we find people really reacting and doing cool things with their new habits. This is where you're allowed to just feel what's there, whether it's anger, jealousy, love, faith, joy, kindness, sexual energy. They're all allowed to be. And you're going to let them either pass or you're going to get on that train, right? Very often we get on the love train. Very often we can get on the faithfulness train, but the challenge is letting anger and jealousy actually have a voice. Well, we can thank Morgan for that. So I'll tell her you said you love the train analogy. So first, now moving through that, I think we might have an exercise on this. Hold on. Trying to remember if I built one for this one. Consequences of people-pleasing assessment, enhanced self-awareness. I did not. And we are at 11:17. I may actually get through all this today. Wouldn't that be interesting? Enhanced self-awareness. So any questions while I'm sitting here thinking about it, about self-awareness? Okay. Am I missing this trigger timing? Such a great question. So you happen to notice when you're on the train, right? So this is a great analogy. So, all right. So let's use this as an example. Let's pretend for a second that you've already hopped on a train unwittingly and you're not real happy about it. Okay? So you've hopped on a train, you're not real happy about it. We'll move my chair. So here's your train, right? Your train. Going stack. It's a really awful train, but you get the idea, right? You're going down the tracks, right? And then you happen to veer off this way. Right? You meant to go this way, right? You meant to go straight. Okay. What do? Do you stop here? Okay, so there's two options. Like, technically, two options. From here, you can blow up the train. Right? You can disintegrate the train. You can, screw it up, right? Whatever it takes. Or you can just simply go backward and start where you left off and correct course. Now, pretending that that's not something that you can do, all you have to do is correct course, right? At the next junction, just turn, right? Margie McCaslin says that the train ran her over. So I use this more often with cars, right? Because cars are kind of on this trajectory. But pretend I'm driving from Los Angeles to Atlanta, right? And I turn and go the wrong way, and I end up headed south. Do I then stop and light the car on fire? No, of course I don't, right? What I do instead is turn around and either go back to where I screwed up and continue on my path, or I correct course, right? So if you're in this position where you notice that you hopped on the wrong train, get off the train. Right at the next station, just watch the shit pass. The interesting thing about this analogy is it does kind of create in you this idea that everything is like a finite decision, and they're really not, right? When you put it in perspective of like an airplane or a car or something that uses headings, right? If you're 1% off your heading and you're flying from LA to Atlanta, you will land in Florida. Right? Because over a long enough timeline, you're going to veer way too far off course, right? That's why you're constantly making sure you're going in the right direction. You course correct, right? So, Chris, that was a great question. Thank you for that. Let's see, my mind hops on trains all at once, thanks to ADHD. I want to speak to this. This one very specifically. I have ADHD. I have my entire life. It's been a pain in my ass for a long time, and now it's not. And the reason it's not is because I just don't let it be, right? And that's not to say that I'm in some way chastising you. I'm not, right? But what I'm saying is, now that you know that this is a possibility, right? You can take your hyper focus and do stuff with it. And if you have ADHD, then you probably know how to hyper focus, right? So start pointing that energy at understanding the trains, right? Understanding the schedule. One of the things that I've noticed is that I have a pretty interesting operational schedule for my train tracks, right? Like, I know when bad emotions are coming. So use those to benefit your life and to accelerate you, right? And that's what I've found has been powerful for me, Rachel. Also, of course, taking care of myself and working out. Somebody mentioned food as an issue, right? In the addictive narrative too. And I want to just address that there's a lot of different kinds of addictions. Mine was, alcohol and drugs that made me go fast. And then, certain sexual proclivities as well, I'm sure could be categorized in there. Secondarily, I also love food, right? So basically anything that can quell the dopamine need in me is something I can get addicted to. For instance, this is my 12th cup of coffee today. So this is, Giselle, this is a really important point, right? People pleasers very often feel like they're out of control of their own lives. And we tend to lean into things that make us feel like we're in control. When everybody was telling me I needed to quit drinking, I was very much on the camp of like, why? Like, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. This is my life, right? Very all or nothing mentality, right? Conan, this is another really interesting one, is addicted to self-improvement or personal growth. Like, anything you do to the excess is probably not good for you. There is such a thing as too much personal growth. And it's not very often talked about, but it's very much the truth. You can only absorb so much information, right? And chances are, if you're even remotely connected to the rest of us, which all of us are interconnected in various ways, energetically, you have all the knowledge you need to make the changes you need to make. But nobody wants to freely admit that, right? And the reason is that it feels a lot better to go and pretend to change than it does to actually change, right? This is a great example of that, right? I'm addicted to self-help books, right? One of the things I've stopped doing, one of the things I made a decision in this year, in fact, is that I will no longer read self-help literature as my only form of reading, right? So I read 2 fiction books for every single nonfiction I read now, because I got the idea that it's possibly more important for my imagination to be alive and to be able to create responses and come up with ways of showing up and to stimuli, rather than just reading and trying to implement what works for everybody else, right? Oh no, Laura's going to have to stop taking online courses. Laura, you get out of here. Just kidding. You can stay. But considering what it takes to make the change is fine, and reading how to do that is fine, and absorbing that data is fine. But at some point, you're just procrastinating, pretending to be busy, right? So yeah, over time, you'll learn to find comfort in the dark that is a people pleaser. So living in the dark in my mother and her relationship with depression. Yeah. Lisa, my favorite fictional writers, Kurt Vonnegut is where I would start. So moving on. Thank you again, Morgan, for the trains analogy. Right. So next thing here is we need to start to understand our own values, right? Understanding our identity and self-awareness is vitally important, right? What do I want? What do I want to want? Right? What are you prioritizing now, and what do you want to prioritize? If you prioritize that, how does that affect other people? Right? So thinking through how do we find our identity, we have to go, this is again where we have to level up, right? So let me go back to my thing. I really like this back and forth switchy thing. All right. So here we have self-discovery. And lack of self. This is a challenging one, because self-discovery is often, people like to talk about it like it's the winner of all things, and it's not a bad way to live. Lack of self is not a great way to live either. But it boils down to this: they're on sort of the same through line, right? Because if you're trying to discover self, but you're coming from lack, you're actually not doing anything, right? So what we're trying to accomplish is to go up again to another level, right? From here, we are in self-invention. Self-invention is a higher energetic vibration, because you're allowing yourself to have moments where you don't know, and then to experience new things along the journey. So many of you have been people pleasers for 2 and 3 decades. It's going to be a challenge for you to discover this version of you because you haven't accessed yourself enough to know what that is. So one of the exercises I like to work with people on is, how do you accelerate your performance in this way? How do you become more in tune with who you are? I want you to think of when you were 4 years old, right? Or maybe in first grade, maybe in fourth grade, the first kind of early memory you have. I want you to think of a toy that you really liked and write down why you liked it. What was it about it that you liked? What did it make you feel? Give yourself like 10 minutes to write down this idea of like this toy or this thing that you did or this event that you were involved in, right? And I want you to write all of that down. And then I want you to ask yourself as an adult, what would it look like to recreate this? Do I need to go out and buy myself a basketball? Should I go join a kickball league? Should I go to the library more? Should I take another class? Should I go learn to cook? Right? What would it look like as an adult for you to recreate that feeling in that moment? Because there is going to be where your power is in self-invention. Like, way too many people don't understand that if you can just, so Mike, I will repeat that. To repeat what I just said, I want you to think of a time when you were 4 years old, between 4 and 7, right? And you had a toy that you really loved, or you had an activity that you really loved. And I want you to write down, what about it did you like? How did it make you feel? What were the core components of you that it engaged? Was it your creativity? Was it, and that's another question, was it creativity? Was it your physical prowess? Was it, I mean, what could be a million things, right? What did you love about it? And then I want you to think about, how do I engage that part of me? How do I recreate that feeling as an adult? And you're probably going to come up with a lot of different answers. And that's okay, right? Through every single one of those answers, there's an experience you can go create. And that's what I want you to do. Okay. I want you to create that experience again. What you're doing there is you're engaging your inner child. You're engaging the creative, inspirational part of your brain to come back to life. And through that, you begin to self-invent. Because we spend way too much time trying to do things. I would create a world without my angry dad in it when I played. Okay, good. So this is a really good example. So what does it look like for you to create a world where you can go play without your dad? That's actually a great example, right? Raina, I'm not sure you meant for it to be a great example, but it is, right? Because here's the deal. You're the adult now. You get to parent that part of you, right? And Katie, I struggled with this too. What if you have no memory of that age? Okay, great. Close your eyes and imagine being that age. What memory would you want to create? Right? When I did this for myself the first time, I don't have a lot of memories from my early childhood. From about 3 to 9, I've kind of got nothing. And what I did have was not great, right? So just go to the earliest memory you can remember. That was a good memory, right? Not the awful one. Just pick the earliest memory that you remember. Maybe it was 13 riding a bicycle. Maybe it was 16 when you got your car. I don't know, right? Just go to the earliest thing you can remember. If you really struggle with that parameter of early childhood, which a lot of us do, that can be a challenge, right? Struggling with this. Fondest memory when I got my first typewriter at 7. Laura, that doesn't sound like a struggle. That sounds like you need to go get a typewriter. Raina, wow, Raina made a big difference in our chat here today. This is such a powerful comment. And Alice, I want to encourage you to take what she said there and do something with it too, because guys, look, we all have a past. We all have things that sucked, right? And if you can think back to what Seth is saying here, is like, think of things that light you up and make you feel alive, and then go experience more of those. It's about doubling down on things that you might like and letting the chaff sort itself out. right? So going back to the course here, self-invention over discovery, right? You don't need to know who you are because you were never allowed to invent it, right? You were never allowed to invent it, right? You were always doing the same things. You have always been trying to create from a place of what other people wanted you to be, which means now you have to understand that this whole idea of self-discovery is basically a myth, right? You never invented you, so now it's time to do that, right? Rather than trying to discover who you are, you have the opportunity to invent who you are. What would you like to try and experience? You can identify as someone who enjoys anything you want, right? Pesci, this is a great comment. If you have no memory, try playing with your kids. Try playing with young kids. That'll help. They have a whimsical way about them, don't they? Which brings us to the final section of the morning, which is, I'm going to get to that in a second because I want to answer some of these questions. This is such a powerful, powerful idea. Melissa, I would challenge you today to go find something that allows you to dance, right? Whether it's going out to a nightclub and doing that, or whether it's taking a dance lesson, but this is a really powerful comment. Thank you for putting that in here. Emma, another one. I like making crafts and things and painting. Okay, go buy yourself some paints, right? Go pick up a couple of rocks and have a day. This is what they talk about, yes. So when we talk about reparenting our inner child, this is such a big point. I never understood it either until I kind of figured this part out. Kitchen disco, I love it. You guys are great. I love the support you guys are giving each other. I think it's really fantastic, by the way. So keep doing that. What a cool thing you're doing for each other. So let's see. Make sure I get everything in here. Good. So I think what I would like to do is yeah, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to start with boundaries and work through that because I think that's a really important place to end for the morning, or at least get us a good handle on what we're doing. Let's see. One. Good. All right. Laura, interestingly enough, the Boundary Bootcamp community and program is launching again. Unfortunately, the community settings it would be too much of a Leviathan for myself and for my boy Mark to manage at this point because this course got so big so quickly. But what I will say is that the next one does have a community, and you'll be getting information about that in the coming days, probably this evening, actually. So yeah, when I was stressed, I would climb a tree or go out into nature. That's a great idea. Like go for a hike. Thank you, Brian. Emma. Yes. It can mean that. There's a lot of things it can be. One of the things I'm wishing I had was a ring light right now. I feel like I'm a little dark. Do you see me? All right. Moving on. It's 8:30 p.m. here. Maybe don't go out right now. So moving into boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries. You may or may not know I'm kind of an expert in the subject. So first and foremost, we want to understand what boundaries are, right? What most people think are boundaries are not boundaries, right? You're looking to identify your own mental, physical, and emotional needs, but that's not the process, right? You have to learn how to communicate, right? This is the determinant factor in your effectiveness of boundaries. Mark can probably speak to this as well if he's still around with us, right? You have to be calm and assertive And you need to know you have permission to you don't have to have the permission of other people to have your boundaries, right? They determine how you spend your energy. They are delineators between what you will accept and what you will not accept, what you will tolerate and what you will not tolerate, right? And then learning to listen, right? Rather than defending your position, right? As you move through your boundary journey, you have to remember this is a long game and it's not going to be for everybody. Okay. You're going to need to learn conflict resolution, right? We don't set boundaries with other people. People bump up against our boundaries and it creates conflict, right? We then have to decide how much force we're going to use to push back on that. It's not one size fits all, right? This is a huge deal, especially when we're talking boundaries in terms of conflict resolution. The amount of times that people will bump up against your boundaries is indistinguishable. I mean, honestly, it's probably going to be innumerable, right? So if you eliminate every single person that bounces up against one of your boundaries, you're not going to have anybody in your life, right? So you can't just eliminate everyone, which means the result has to be equal to the offense, right? Sometimes it just requires a conversation, right? So part of this is you need to be aware that boundaries are created. Like a really good way to know if you have a boundary that's a good one is, does it bring everyone around you to a higher level of consciousness? Okay. So when people bump up against your boundaries, it creates conflict. You then have to decide what you're going to do with that, right? And then self-awareness, which we just talked about, and self-reflection. Mark is talking in the thing, and he's been with me a while. Mark's been working with us now for about a year. If I don't turn him into my assistant coach here soon, it'd be a surprise, right? But engaging in the self-reflection to understand your needs, your values, your priorities, which informs the creation of your boundaries, right? Assessing your boundaries consistently, right? And reflecting on your own needs and values and priorities, again, is vital in this structure, right? Also means that your boundaries are going to change over time. So your boundaries are not like a set rule book. I know that's a surprise to people, but some are, but most aren't, because your ability to move with situational awareness is going to change all that, right? So the first thing you have to understand about boundaries is you have to learn to say no. It's the number one boundary that you're ever going to experience, right? Consistently saying yes to everything is likely turned into a plague in your life. So you have to change your default answer to no, right? Which will give you some time to focus on what you really value. So I don't know how to say your first name, but Levitas. I have all of these slides available. If you're trying to take notes, I have all of these slides available in the course framework. You just have to go and log in. You should have gotten an email about it, right? Just in case anybody else wants it, right? I can't really slow down and go back. But the other part of this is empathy and compassion. Having good boundaries is not about being a jerk. Remember, as we talked about, we'll go back to this analogy. Having good boundaries is not about being a jerk, okay? People pleasing. Jerk. Okay? No boundaries. This person has rules. This is really important, what I'm talking about right now, so pay close attention to this, okay? No boundaries, rules. Right? So what we're trying to do is go up a level to integrate. Here we have boundaries, and we have kindness. Picking up what I'm putting down here, right? So remember that your boundaries are not going to fix other people. Okay. Alice, I'm going to answer that question too. That's what I should, let's see. What is this question? Particularly recently, or those who around me who aren't, who I want in life. Okay. This is an interesting point, Alice. This is what I struggle with, particularly recently, as I think of those around me who aren't, who I want in my life. They continually challenge and override what I've pointed out are my qualities and I'm looking to cultivate. I hate to break it to you, my friend, but I don't think those are people you want in your life. Like, the real challenge is what you just said is, if you're going to live a life that's valuable to you and makes you feel happy and joyful and peaceful, people that are sabotaging that consistently don't love you. They'll say they do, but that's not loving, right? There's a difference between loving someone and actually, being loving. And remember, it's okay to love people that aren't in your life. I certainly do. I have a sister that I haven't spoken to in 13 years. I'll probably never lay eyes on her again, and that's probably for the best. But at the end of the day, I still love her. So keep in mind as you kind of walk through that, right? So going back to this empathy and compassion point, you're not going to make the world at large subscribe to your fire-branded rule book, right? This means that you have to practice empathy and compassion as you let other people adjust to your new way of living, right? Especially if you hope to keep them in your life. And more than anything, celebrate your wins. Matt, good to see you, buddy. This is a great comment. Some people will be happy that I'm setting boundaries. Others who have grown to benefit from my lack of boundaries will be challenged. This is true. It's true to a point. So very often, especially if we're talking about children, they actually like that we start setting boundaries, right? That we are giving them structure for how to treat us, because then we are the parent. Very often our people pleasers like to be the friend to their children. And that creates a lack of boundaries. Matt, I don't think this is your modality of living. I think you're probably not in that camp, but I see this in a lot of people pleasers, especially nice guy dads, where they're like their buddy, right? I don't need you to be my buddy. I need you to be my dad, right? And to do that, so with kids and with parents, it's very much kind of the same game. Julie, how long did it take for you to feel you went from a place of no boundaries to successfully setting boundaries? A year, a decade? That is such a people pleaser question. People pleasers want to know the timeline. Like, how long will I be like this? You're going to have to work on your boundaries forever, Julie. This is a process of a long, long time. It's something that you work on because you love you. It's part of your self-care routine. It's a thing you do consistently over time. Your boundaries don't just get set and then you forget them. Like, you have to keep doing it. Joshua, thanks, brother. I appreciate you. We are relaunching that. And it's there's going to be more to it. So to your point, Julie, it's like, how long did I take? Yes, right. I mean, start saying no and do that and see what that happens. And very well, you'll see that your life starts to change, right? But the boundary journey is one that changes because you change, right? I want to give you some love on that one, on Raina. So the magic you were looking for is the work you've been avoiding. That's Mark Manson, by the way, Mark. So it's either Mark Manson or Neil Strauss. I don't know. By the way, guys, we're doing pretty good on time here. I'm going to need to take a break because my voice is getting worn out. I need some water, which I have incidentally right here. But there we go. So, moving on. Back into the boundaries world, right? So your boundaries are going to change over time, and you're going to need to be flexible, and you're going to need to adapt, right? There's no sense in continually trying to enforce boundaries that are no longer serving you and that no longer line up with who you are, right? People change over time, and you have to be willing to allow that in your others, but in other people around you, but you also have to allow it in yourself. So where you might have a boundary around certain things, a great example, it always comes up, is like, in terms of sexuality, there's always boundaries that move and change over time. Like with every person, like your wants and needs move. Some things that you may have never wanted to do, maybe you do want to do. And then maybe there's things you wanted to do that then you don't want to do. And that can be across all spectrums. But when you just put it in the terms of sexuality, that's usually the easiest one for people to grasp, is because sometimes you want what you want, sometimes you don't want that thing, right? And those are boundaries as well, right? You need to learn to develop a very high resilience here, right? Mark, again, you can talk to this, but developing the resilience to uphold boundaries, even in the face of resistance and criticism, right? This is the antithesis of what it means to be a people pleaser. This is leveling up, right? When you can hold your boundaries, even in the face of criticism, stay committed to your self-care and your personal principles, right? So it's a big change that you're going to make, right? So, and then of course you're going to have to negotiate. This is really important because nobody talks about this. But boundaries require negotiation, right? They're not rules, and you may occasionally need to compromise, right? Remember that there's a difference between a deal breaker and a boundary, and we'll discuss those later in this course. But in Boundary Bootcamp, which has been changed a lot, Mark, we're going to really dive deep into what are boundaries and personal growth for somebody in the middle, right? It's going to be amazing, right? Chocolate cake is another example. It's awesome. Well, I don't know that I've ever set a boundary against chocolate cake, Alice. I've never set a boundary against any cake, now that I say it. I'm a person who loves a cake. My ex-girlfriend used to joke that I'd been married so many times because I really enjoy wedding cake. And I've been married a lot. By the way, in terms of marriage advice, I'm really good at getting there. I hadn't been great at holding on to it. In the vein of relationship struggles, guys, I was a people pleaser the whole time, right? So I was constantly trying to please everybody around me. And guess what? Then I ended up burned out. I had no energy to give anymore. And what was my giving became unsustainable, right? Boundaries are kryptonite for gaslighters. I agree to that to a degree. I would say that boundaries are more gasoline for your superpowers than they are about anybody else. So let's see. Hardest thing to do for me in life. Parents were yellers and did not tolerate insubordination. Has stuck with me even though they were both dead. Dave, I want to talk about that. I had a parent that was a yeller. And one of my boundaries is I do not tolerate raised voices. Period. Like, I don't yell at you, you don't yell at me. And if it escalates to a yelling match, I will very often just walk away from that relationship, or not relationship, but from that conversation. And the way I do that is say, hey, understand that what you're doing is not going to work for me. So I'm going to step away from this for the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes until we can both calm down. And then we'll discuss this quietly at that time. Right. So keep in mind that that's a big boundary for me too, is I don't tolerate yelling. I don't negotiate on that either. So some of the benefits, of course, or some of the things that you have to understand about your boundaries is that you're going to have to get clear about your priorities around time and commitments to prioritizing activities that align with your goals and values, right? So what do I mean by this? If, for instance, on Sundays, I watch the Patriots play every single year, right? I watch it every Sunday. That's what I do every time, which means I do not take meetings on Sundays. And I also don't do anything until the game's over. That's just my boundary. It's like something that I do for me and I love for me. So I prioritize that as a commitment, right? And then I'm also this is another one that's very rarely talked about, is consistencies, right? Boundaries based on value systems, not on emotions, require consistency, because without it, you develop this lack of confidence in what you stand for, right? You have to be willing to speak up no matter what and when it's necessary, and remain true to how you hold yourself. This is more for you than it is for others. It leads to trusting you, right? In the consistency vein, though, also exists this idea that if you set boundaries, if you have a boundary around certain conversations, like I don't discuss money, politics, or religion with my family. I can't discuss it with my mom and then not discuss it with my son. It's my family, right? So when you have boundaries that are very consistent, everybody gets to play by the same rules. So very important that you understand that. We're going to talk a lot more about boundary setting strategies, but remember that they are guidelines for how you show up in the world. You don't have to have a million conversations with everybody that you know to determine what you're going to spend your energy on, right? You just simply have to make the decision that these are the things that I value and these are what I stand for. And then stick to it, right? I can't even see this quote. What is she trying to say here? Hang on. I don't know what I said. Oh yeah, confidence. That's it. Mark, I'm glad I remembered this, right? Confidence is not about how you carry yourself. It's not about your clothes, right? Your confidence is delineated by how much you trust that you will do what you said you're going to do. That's it. Self-confidence is, do I trust in what I say I'm going to do? So when you think of confidence in that mindset, it changes very often how you show up in the world, right? So there are 7 types of boundaries. I'll let you guys go through the slides, but we have our physical, emotional, mental, material, time, social, and sexual boundaries, right? Every single one of these is important. So one thing I want to talk about boundaries, and then we're going to take a break for lunch. So as boundaries go, avoiding 3 topics that compromise culture makes it profound to pleasing others. This is a great question. The answer to that is no. Most people get pissed off when I tell them I won't talk about that, right? Because I don't have to like avoiding 3 topics that compromise the culture that makes up our foundation. Isn't that pleasing others? There's 2 suppositions in this question that are incorrect. Number one, it's not pleasing others. And number 2, you're supposing that I care what makes up the culture. I don't, right? I choose not to have those conversations with my family because it generally creates conflict, right? And I'm not going to intentionally create conflict. I'm not going to put myself in positions where there's conflict. I don't enjoy conflict, right? Talking about religion very often just makes the problem worse. So I don't consider doing that, right? Am I avoiding conflict? No, I am not allowing conflict to be created. Hope that makes sense. Final note on boundaries for the day. Then I need to take a break and get some lunch. I'll be eating at my desk and asking questions after this. So know that that's going to come to. All right. So here's how you can start to assert boundaries, right? First, remember that a good boundary does one thing, okay? Well, it does a lot of things, but it does one very important. It raises consciousness collectively. So when we talk about how do we set a boundary or how do we communicate a boundary, okay, the first thing you have to do is express what it was, okay? Dr. Robert Glover taught me this, which is the ouch principle. Simply acknowledging that somebody has committed an offense. Ouch. Right? Still with me? All right. There's a few that, may or may not be, right? So, ouch. Okay? Which is to say, what you did, or I feel hurt, is a better way of saying that. I'm gonna stay on, Gary, and just eat and talk while I do this, like I'm doing a working lunch. Can I make the whiteboard? Oh yeah. Can I make the whiteboard bigger? I mean, not really. I can probably move it closer. Better? All right. So, raise collective consciousness. Ouch principle, which is to say, that hurt. Oh, change the screen. Duh. Thanks, Roderick. All right. Now, okay. So, ouch principle. First, you have to admit that there was a pain, right? Then you have to describe the pain. Right? So, ouch, you hurt me, or that hurt. Let's do this. that hurt. I felt, we'll go, this could be, ouch, that hurt. I felt dismissed. I felt, I don't know, overlooked. I felt like, pick a feeling. We'll just go with dismissed. Ouch, I felt dismissed. Okay. See how this works? Good. Ouch, I felt dismissed. Third step. Most important step. I'm going to make it big. Did you mean to? Okay. Kaon, I felt, right? Justin, you have to refresh the page. It'll come, right? I felt disrespected. I felt objectified. These are great. Thank you guys, right? Did you mean to? Why would I ask this question? I'll give you the short answer, because I don't make the assumption. Hang on, TikTok's mad at me. Oh. There. All right, we're back, TikTok. Sorry about that. So, ouch, right? Going back to this, I'm going to walk through this a few times. Ouch, that hurt. I felt dismissed. I felt objectified. I felt, etc. Right? People are unaware of their effects. Did you mean to? No, it actually doesn't have. I love this comment, Laura. I'm not shitting on you, but this isn't it. Right? The reason this is important, okay, is because it allows them to realize that there was an offense, and then you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Rather than judging them, you are giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Kirsten, great comment. Okay. Because the things we assume are intentional are accidental or not conscious choice at all. Right. We are interpreting the information. So if they say no, right? Oh God, no, I'm really sorry. What do we do then? Oh, okay. Well, here's how we could avoid that in the future. Thank you. Conflict squashed. Right? Conflict squashed. What a powerful way to do this. Okay. Did you mean to? If the answer is yes, so no, and we have equals no, accept apology. Easy peasy. Dave, I'll get to that question. Okay. No equals apology. Now here's a weird one. What if they fucking say yes? Yes, I did mean to hurt you. Okay. Yes, I did mean to hurt you. You hurt my feelings and I hurt you back. Okay. Well, there's two things that then have to happen. Number one, subcategory number one is assess damage. And both apologize. Okay. You don't get to hurt people. And then when they hurt you back, it is what it is, right? So assess damage, both apologize. Okay. If they meant to hurt you. Second is say, going forward, if I hurt you, please just tell me. If I hurt you. Or follow above. I assume by most standards that everybody is pretty good, right? The challenge is You do have to take responsibility for this framework. Okay. Do you have to assess the damage and both apologize? I said assess the damage. I didn't say one person assesses the damage, right? Everybody is going to hurt you. Like, you're going to get hurt by everyone. Just so you know, no matter how much I love a person, I am going to hurt them in my lifetime. Okay? I could be madly in love with any one of you, and I'm still probably going to do damage to you in some way or another over a long enough timeline. If you fire everybody in your life that ever hurts your feelings, you will be very, very lonely. Right? Explain 1 and 2. So raising collective consciousness. If you think about this, here, the number's probably not right. This is the purpose. Raise collective consciousness. Step 1, step 2, step 3, 4, 5. Right? No is you accept the apology. Yes is you assess the damage. And you both need to apologize. Right? What if you hurt them by accident and they returned it on purpose? So what? You are still responsible for hurting them. They're still responsible for hurting you. Right? I know that all of this sucks, guys, but there's another component that we have to talk to. Okay? What if they say something dismissive? Because I know everybody in this class is saying, well, Nick, you don't understand because I have a dismissive family member, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? I have that too. So here's how you handle that. Finally, if you get dismissed, and here's how that sounds. You're too sensitive. Right? That's a big one. You guys are getting stuck in the apology feed. That tells me something, right? It means we need to talk about forgiveness next rather than what I was going to do next. So if you get dismissed, what do? If they say, stop being for guys, if they say, stop being a pussy, or they call you a wuss, or they say you're too sensitive, or they say you're overreacting, what do you do with those people? You eliminate / turn down the volume. Period. Sorry. That's the deal. You are giving people a fair shake by using this framework. If you get to here and they're like, no, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, okay, great. Right? Higher level of consciousness, right? If they say yes, you say, oh, wow, what did I do that pissed you off so much that you would hurt me on purpose? And then say, I'm sorry for that part. Going forward, if I hurt you, this is what I expect. Still with me? Right? I'm not saying that you're responsible for everybody else's emotions. You're not. In fact, that is the definition of emotional instability. Right? Assess the damage and both apologize. Whether they do or don't is not up to you. Whether you do or don't is up to you. Okay? You say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. That was not my intention either. Right? I'm happy to apologize for that. What just happened, however, notice that I didn't just say, what just happened, however, is not acceptable. So if there's a moment in time where I hurt you, all I ask is that you simply tell me that and we'll address it rather than this passive aggressive back and forth pain. Right? It's about raising the consciousness of the people around you that you love. Right? Boundaries are how people get close to you, not how you eliminate them. Your boundaries are really only to decide a couple of things, guys. And this is absolutely vital to understand. Okay? Your boundaries in the external decide who gets to be in your space. They decide what they get to do there. They decide when they get to leave, or when they are going to leave, and how long they get to stay. That's it. Right? Boundaries are how people get close to you. They define for you who gets to be in your space, what they get to do while they're there, how long they get to stay, and when they have to leave. That's it. That's it. So, with that said, I'm going to go make myself a sandwich. I'm going to get a cup of water. I'm going to use the restroom. And then I'm going to sit here and answer questions at my desk. So don't ask too much while I'm gone. I'm going to put up a little. Let's do another one of those things. How do I do those things? I really need somebody to do these things for me. Right? Coffee break, stand by. I will be right back. I am enjoying all of the comments. If I can figure it out, I might bring a couple people on to the show to let them talk if you're open to that. So I think there's a couple of ways we can do that, but we'll figure it out. I'm going to check my Instagram. Looks like everybody's enjoying the live feed. Very good. If you're watching us on Instagram, it's awesome to have you as well. I hope you're having fun. There are videos coming soon. Thank you, TikTok, for joining us as well. If you want to get on and watch this over on YouTube, that's where you can interact with me, and I'll be answering questions over there for the next hour. TikTok and Instagram. So Instagram, very specifically, you're a massive following for me. I really appreciate you so much. What I need you to do is, if you want to ask questions, just hop over to YouTube. You can ask me the questions over there. So I will see everybody in just a minute. right. You guys see me okay? Let's see. Thank you, Marty. I appreciate you. It's a nice comment. Chris, thank you, brother. I'm glad that you're feeling encouraged. And thank you for the compliments, guys. It's a long day to talk all that and answer questions at my desk, but if you want to know the definition of having a good kid, my oldest son heard me say I was going to get off for lunch and he made me a sandwich. So I guess we'll keep him. So answering questions. Hit me. Let's do my current banner. And Q and A time. So I'll try to answer all your questions I can. And I'm here for it. There's quite a discussion that was going on in the thread here. Let's see. How do you get on the YouTube location? Todd, I see you. I'm actually I just saw that I'm able to answer the Facebook questions too, so I'll answer from here too. Let's see, new comments. Hooray! I start well, but I go back to my role. That's interesting, Sebastian. Answer that. Do the drawing. So there's what I call the abusive cycle of change. It's really so. Margie McCaslin said it best. It's like maybe practice, but there's also an abusive cycle of change, right? I call it abusive cycle of change, or ACK. I'm tired. All right. So here's what happens. You recognize that there's something you want to change, right? And you're like here, you level up to here, right? You're going along and you do pretty well in that first week. Okay. You kind of get a little complacent here during this time, and you're kind of still at that level, that up level in week 2, right? So this is week 1, week 2. Okay. So you're kind of still at this level. Then you hit like a dip. It's not a big dip, but in the alcoholic or the addict, what we see is this dip then creates an overcorrection because you do the thing where you kick your own ass, right? Remember, I've said this before that like kicking your own ass, if it was going to work, it would have worked already. So you then will do this thing where you tell yourself like, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a failure, etc. And you then overcorrect, right? This overcorrection is about 2 or 3 steps higher than the one before. So what you'll see here is like you'll start working out more, or you'll start taking really good care of yourself, or you're doing all the boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go from here, right? So you're like at this high unsustainable level, right? You've now overcorrected to a point that literally you can't tolerate it much more, okay? Because you're like way up here now, you're going to hit another dip, right? Because this is unsustainable. It's going to be much bigger, right? Then you're going to try and get back to center line, but because you're tired, you're actually going to correct lower. And you're going to go along. So this is week 3. Okay. This center line represents slightly lower than the original correction point. And in week 4, you're going to crater. Okay. This crater is where you stop doing it altogether. And you end up recorrecting to course well below where you originally started. Because you're tired, you're bored, you're frustrated, you did something stupid, whatever it is. The reason we do it is because we aren't doing 2 things. Number one, you're not celebrating your wins. Okay. So I see this in the recovery world a lot. Is like, if you don't celebrate your wins, you will fail. Right. Sophia said it. I realize I isolate myself to avoid people pleasing. How do I stop that behavior? You have to realize that because you have to say, okay, I'm choosing as one of my boundaries, one of my guidelines for how I show up is that I'm going to actively go and pursue relationships. Right. So this is week 4. Okay. This is usually where everybody falls apart. By the way, this is also, you're going to hate this part. So this is how you abuse yourself with your own goals. Ready? This is also very often what narcissistic abuse looks like. Hooray! Right? You tell them to make a change. They do. It goes along for about a week. Then they fall apart a little bit in week 2. They overcorrect. So like, let's say you're a lady and you're in a relationship with a narcissist. This is where that they yell at you or they gaslight you a little bit. Then they come back with flowers this time and they try and maintain that behavior as best they can. Right? Then in week 3, if you're in the narcissistic abuse cycle, it will fall off really hard. You'll have a big fight. You'll recognize another behavior. Something will happen and they start to really gaslight the shit out of you and they correct. But because it's a correction, you kind of give up a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, they're trying, right? It's fine. And then in week 4, this is where abuse reoccurs. Right? Laura Reed, great example. It's a slot machine, right? Intermittent reinforcement, right? The way to negate this is to reinforce your own behaviors with positive affirmation. And I don't mean shouting affirmations at yourself in the mirror. No, Sebastian, you're not a narcissist. You have a behavior that's on the same through line as a narcissist. You abuse you, right? And let's not go too far down the rabbit hole of narcissism because, frankly, people are using it as an excuse to excuse their own shitty behaviors too. This is to point out that this is also how you treat you. Now, here's how you stay consistent. Step 1. Celebrate. Every night, you should write down your wins. Right? Sebastian, you're fine, buddy. all good, bro. Right? Celebrate your wins. I do this in a journal every night. And it doesn't have to be a big celebration, guys. Like sometimes you just have to write it down and be like, okay, I did that, right? I'm good. Right? I'm okay. I'm okay. I did good today, right? You also need to take account in your journal. So like you celebrate your wins, but also in my journal, I write down things that I write down my opportunities for the day, right? What could I have done better? Right? So celebrate your wins. Number 2, more importantly, do not multitask. Change right now. Okay. Pick a thing you want to fix and fix it. Then pick another thing you want to fix and fix it. Most of you are struggling because you try and fix everything all at once, right? You need to remember that people pleasing isn't a behavior in itself. It's a constellation of different behaviors. It's conflict. We talked about this at the beginning. It's conflict avoidance. It's not standing up for your own needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So you need to figure out one of those things and start to fix it, right? Because how you fix that one thing will essentially be ultimately how you fix all the things, right? So when you start to look at how you show you that you love yourself, that's how you remain consistent. So you journal, you celebrate your wins, you do that every day. Secondarily, you do not multitask. You pick one change to make at a time, right? Unless you're working with a coach or you're in a safe environment, you can't fix all things at the same time, right? Even with a good coach, you're looking at fixing 2 to 3 different items that are really important to you that are going to move the needle, right? That being said, journal every night. It's a great habit to start. I put mine next to my bed. I knock out a little journal, even if it's 5 minutes, just something. And I write down my goals and what I want to accomplish the next day. That's it, right? And then the next day, maybe I write more, maybe I write less. But overall, do not multitask. Making sense? So, Sebastian, great question. Let's see. See if I can find another question here. Is there another one? All right, Joshua. Recently opened up about some conflicts which I've kept hidden for a long time. Now we are out there. I'm terrified, and the fear keeps getting in the way of me finding courage to continue, let alone think clearly. I know that's not a clear question. Yeah, the graph definitely applies to you. Joshua, if you've opened up about some conflicts, first and foremost, you're going to be afraid, right? And that's a very normal emotion, right? So when you think about it in terms of like, I'm afraid and it feels uncomfortable, that's okay, right? So keeping in mind that when you start doing something new, it's going to feel both uncomfortable and scary, especially in the emotional frame. Just remember that your emotions are both not permanent and they're generally not real, right? Your emotions, it's not that they're fake, it's that they're passing, number one. Number two, they are not who you are, they are what you are feeling, right? They're a physical feeling inside of your body and they will pass, right? Your emotions are not permanent and very often they're not real, right? So when you feel those emotions, when you feel that fear, just check in with yourself. The way that I do that is I put my feet on the ground, I really center myself, I just kind of ground in, I take a breath like we did at the beginning of the course today, and I just let the feeling happen, right? And I notice it, I talk to it like, okay, see you, what is that? Right? And very often it'll just pass, right? But so many people in the people pleaser space get so hung up on this idea that I'm not supposed to feel bad, right? That they set themselves up to fail. You're going to feel bad from time to time. That's just how it goes. So, what about perfection when it comes to this? Can you ask this another way, Iris? I'm not sure what you're asking me. Great point, Giselle. A lot of the Instagram comments, guys, I do see you. I just can't answer over there. So know that if you want to interact with us, you can do that on YouTube. You can also join the StreamYard. By the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, you can get on the website, click the link in my bio, any number of ways to get on that, to get into the course itself, and you'll be able to access all this information and more. Oh, Laura, that's a great question. Can you please say more about how to ensure the displeasure of others when you start placing boundaries and saying no? Um, I mean, there's no reason to ensure that. It's either going to happen or it's not. But what you'll find, especially if you learn to start saying no, is that your yes doesn't mean nearly as much as you think it does, and your no means even less. Like, people pleasers are very self-involved in the idea that they think everybody expects a yes out of them. They do, because you've given it to them for so long. But when you stop, you become a normal person. Self-abuse chart. Trying to take care of my son of my son and my son and my goals. How do I deal feelings of perfectionism? I tend to feel awful when I can't do things the right first time. Perfectionism is usually not perfectionism. It's kind of a weird way to say this. You're not afraid of doing it incorrectly. You're afraid that other people will see you do it incorrectly. So you're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to make other people see you as perfect. So what you have to do is allow yourself to say, okay, I am imperfect. You have to accept that in yourself. You are not special enough to be perfect, is another way of saying that, right? So you're going to feel bad. Like, when you start something and you fail, it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel clunky. But whether or not you define it as bad is up to you, right? I don't really see failure. I see failure and learning as synonymous. And when I'm learning, I'm winning. So I'm constantly winning. And Matt, to your point, I actually don't think perfectionism is a fear of failing. I think it's a fear of other people seeing you failing. And there's a big difference, right? That's a good question, Raymond. I think the hardest boundary for me to create, I actually think it was the hardest thing for me to do, was to create inside of my Bill of Rights that I'm allowed to give to myself. One of the hardest things I ever had to learn to do, and it does show up as a boundary as well, is like, I'm allowed to prioritize me. So if I really genuinely don't want to do something, or I don't want to engage in an activity or whatever, like, to be able to prioritize myself has always been the hardest one for me. One of the things that I would say is, I think I can leave that at that, frankly. Learning to give to myself and prioritize myself is the hardest thing to do. Right. And it's still something I work on every day. Right. When you say nonviolent communication, um, I don't know that I have to. So this is a good question. Do you integrate nonviolent communication into this? I don't tolerate violent communication, so there's only one way to communicate with me that'll get you anywhere. If and you know, and it doesn't have to be physically violent. It could be emotionally violent. It could be mentally violent. I just don't tolerate it in my space. So when somebody is being a certain way, very often, or let's say they're being emotionally violent, I will simply just say, "Hey, I choose not to engage in conversations where I am being attacked, and therefore I need to put a pause in this or put a pin in this, and we'll come back to it." I also put in the caveat, like, I'll put a pin in this and come back to you if we can do that in a reasonable way. If not, then we need to stop now, right? Like, I don't do violent communication. To know that we're getting the whole of the United States. You ever get overwhelmed with the quantity of emotions? For example, if one negative emotion links to the others, then a chain reaction occurs. So what you're talking about is having a ruminating brain. Yeah, I have ADD, so I can focus pretty heavily on negativity. Um, so I think the best thing to do is to start recognizing when you start to have that first negative feeling or emotion is to practice like self awareness. Like, what am I feeling right now, and am I okay? Almost universally, you're going to be okay, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. Am I okay? Yeah, I'm probably okay. Which is kind of a shorting out of those negative kind of ruminations that go through the brain. Also, very often, overthinking and rumination and perfectionism are all the same. It's like you're. I heard a great quote the other day. It was, anxiety isn't much more than conspiracy theories you have about yourself. How do you deal with the guilt of saying no from a family that expects a 12-page dissertation of saying no? My sister is a probation officer and always treats her family like offenders. Mel, this is a really interesting question. Um, Practice. Um, First, one of the things I work on in the Boundary Boot Camp is um, owning and taking your Bill of Rights and doing something with it, right? And most people don't know that they have a Bill of Rights, but it's really important that you develop one because the timeline around guilt is actually not guilt itself, it's shame, right? You feel shame when you prioritize yourself, you feel shame when people don't like you feel shame, right? And what you have to do is remove toxic shame and plug in integration, right? So it's the best way I can think of to explain that is that you're probably going to feel some guilt and you're probably going to feel some shame for a while, right? But again, going back to that mindfulness idea is like, what am I feeling? What am I believing? If I can get to that place where I'm believing like my sister's going to hate me, right? Well, let her, right? If you saying no requires a dissertation, then stop giving the dissertation. Which is so. One of the things I've done recently is I've started to be more direct in my social interactions, or start to be more honest, or being totally honest in my social interactions. So if somebody says, do you want to help me move, or can you help me move? One of the things I'll say is, I can, but I don't want to. Or I can, but I'm not going to. Right? I don't. So I could use the allegory of the axe here. Um, and Steve Harvey actually talks about this too. I don't like a lot of his stuff, but this one's pretty funny. So there's a story, and there's a man, and he's chopping wood next to his house. And his neighbor comes over and he says, "Hey, can I borrow your axe?" And the guy chopping the wood stops and he looks at him. He goes, "No, man, you can't borrow my axe today. My wife's making me a steak dinner." Guy looks confused and he goes, "Okay, but like, whether your wife's making you dinner or not, like, can I borrow your axe?" And he goes, "Well, listen, man." Guy with the axe says, I hear you, but can't borrow my axe today. My wife's making me dinner. And they do this for like 10 or 15 minutes. And finally, the guy gets frustrated and he says, listen, dude, I don't know what the hell your wife making you a steak dinner has to do with the axe. I'm asking if I can borrow your axe. The guy with the axe stops, looks at his friend kindly, and says, if I don't want you to borrow my axe, any excuse will do. So remember that you don't have to make excuses. Any excuse will do. And feel free to tell your sister that story if you need to. If I don't want you to borrow my axe, any excuse will do. So I can't go back today, but you can access this recording and you can access all of the coursework in the course itself, which you should have gotten a welcome link to. My Bill of Rights is basically a list of things that I believe I'm allowed to have. So things like I'm allowed to be happy, I'm allowed to have feelings, I'm allowed to enjoy time with my family, I'm allowed to prioritize my Sundays, I'm allowed to. Those are things that are included in my Bill of Rights. Hang on, I got to answer a different question from a different person. All right. What advice would I give to but everyone else before them? I learned from. I hope he's watching. I learned from a guy named Cody Rain that I do not have to accept other people's opinions, especially if they don't have what I want. If they're not going where I want to go, if they're not, if it doesn't make me money, make me happy, or bring me peace, then I don't have to accept it. And you just have to learn that not everybody's for you and you can't please everyone, right? Like if you spend your life trying to make everybody else happy, you'll be miserable. Let's see, Alice, where did I pose badly? I'm out. Great question, Kristen. If you didn't get the coursework link in the email, go to. Can somebody share the link with Kristen? I don't have it readily available at this moment. How do you teach to ask for things, learn to say no, and learn to receive? How do I know when I'm becoming a person that uses people and gives no back? Well, okay. And so, Jacob, you're a people pleaser, buddy. You're not going to correct to that level. Remember that at your core is at your core is kindness. So there's a supposition that, how do I say this? The Judeo-Christian religions, the Judeo religion, and really all of the believers in the larger books tend to believe that we are born into sin. I tend to lean into the idea that most people are born good, that humans are good. And the
biggest challenge you'll have is recognizing that you probably aren't going to be able to overtake. You'll try, right? If you tried to not give to give, every client I've ever worked with goes through this question is like, how do I know when I've gone from giver to no giver? It's the same through line. It's like once you integrate kindness and generosity and love and happiness and joy and boundaries and you know even the dark parts of you, your own anger and your frustrations and all those things, when you integrate all that into you and you allow that to be real, um, you start to function at a different level. And that's what this whole thing is about, right? So I understand your worry, but I would start by trying to not give for a while, and let's see how that turns out before you worry too much about it. I got to check an email, guys. Hold on one sec. Let's see. Interesting. Let's see. What about cutting people off? When you know there's people in your life and you don't want to cut them out, off, but you're used to giving them priority treatment. Sometimes I don't know how to stop giving when it's all done. How do I explain the change to others when they drag me down for it? Okay, so here. Okay, so question number one is like, what makes you want to keep people in your life? That's definitely inside of you. That's you. So that's you functioning in scarcity, which is to say that there's not enough relationships for everybody, and that's just a falsehood. So there's that, right? Sometimes I don't know how to stop giving when all I've done is give. You just stop giving, right? Like ask yourself, am I giving? And then say no. And guys, listen, this is a 2-day mini course. Like I can't answer all of this. Like I can't solve the world's problems today. My 8-week boundary boot camp is launching again in 1 week. Mark, I know, is probably pretty stoked to hear that. But that's probably a better place to do this. But the change is, how do I explain the change when others try to drag me down for it? If they're trying to drag you down for changing the way you show up, then there's no reason to explain, right? If they're dragging you for your behavior and they're making you feel bad because you're prioritizing yourself, those are not people you want to keep in your life, period, right? There's Mark. Yeah. It's funny. It's hard. It's hard. A few family have cut me off after saying no. Yeah, they think you're going nuts. That's not uncommon. How do you overcome feeling like a jerk when you don't do what people expect you to? You don't please in that moment. You start choosing you. I mean, first remember that you're not a jerk, right? And your feeling in that moment is fine, and you're allowed to have that feeling. So just be mindful of it. Allow it to be. Don't fight it, right? And allow that to just happen and see it and notice it and say, okay, what about that's bothering me? And then just kind of move on. But remember that most people don't think you're a jerk. In fact, probably the opposite is true. My colleagues asked me to go to lunch. I said yes, but sometimes later I don't want to, and I have lunch or outside of work. Romana, this is a great question. There is nothing impolite about the word no. Right? There's just nothing impolite about it. So if you say, do you want to go out to lunch? And I don't want to go, I'm going to go, no, I don't want to do that today. That's it. I don't really feel like it. Right? Oh, how come? I don't want to. It's not impolite. It's just real, right? We're so focused on being polite that we don't realize what's not, it's not impolite to say no. It's not an impolite statement, right? The reality is you can just say no, right? You don't have to be like, no, you dirty bitch. I don't want to go to lunch with you. That would be insane. But, just no is fine. No, I'm good. Right. No was the yell word my dad used. To not be like him, I swore off using it. Yeah. A lot of people pleasers are trying to not be like their dad or their mom. So, yeah, that's pretty common. Why do we feel the need to explain? You don't feel the need to explain. You're uncomfortable by saying no. It has nothing to do with the explanation. You're filling the quiet gap because you are uncomfortable with that emotion. You are uncomfortable. You are not going to die. When I realized I wasn't going to die by saying no, I was able to start saying no more often, right? And saying no a lot, right? I say no to a lot of things. How can I conduct myself at work? Not allowing people pleasing tendencies to happen with coworkers and bosses. Prioritize my goals. This is a great one, Nathan. You just got to start saying no, bro. Like you got to say no much more often. Early and often. Say no. You should definitely join my boundary boot camp. Pesci. That's who I'm talking to. Trust me. Years of suppressing myself have put me in the state where I really want to explode and I don't care about anyone. I felt too much of it. I just don't want to feel anything. I'm sorry to hear that, man. That sucks. That's a bummer. I've been there. Usually that was where I would turn to drinking or some other form of vice. What I would suggest for you is go out and break some shit. Honestly, or go join a boxing gym, go do something to get this frustration and anger out of you. If you're in a place that you can Google the word rage room, if you find one near you, maybe go do that. But you have to get this stuff out of you so you can start to see clearly and start to have fun in your life again. I like this. Tammy, it's aggressive, but I like it. I don't know how sustainable it is, but I like it. So yeah, I dig that. Yep. Alice, this all kind of boils down to getting back to the authentic you, or even really to inventing the authentic you. And that part of that is even sometimes with family. Not everybody's for you, and that's okay, right? So it's worth noting that pain is real and it hurts and it sucks. And I mentioned earlier that I have a sister that I'll probably never speak to again, and it hurts sometimes, but it doesn't hurt more than the way they treated me. And some of those things I don't ever want to relive again, and I don't know that trust could ever be rebuilt. I can forgive, by the way. So we're going to talk about forgiveness next. I'm going to do a short thing on forgiveness because I think people don't understand that word. I happen to have knowledge that in the thread with us today is somebody who literally wrote their dissertation on the idea. So I might get some flack for this, but we're going to talk about forgiveness in that sense. Ramana, for men, so this is a great question. Is there a book I can recommend about inventing the authentic you? I recommend everybody read. There's two. I really like Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Mark, if you're watching or you happen to see this, I'd like to come on your show, bud. So, shameless shout out. But in fact, if you're on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, tag Mark Manson and tell him to bring me on the show. But I would recommend The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a great book. A lot of what I talk about comes from there. Dr. Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy, and kind of mix in Atomic Habits. And that's kind of, and then you mix in. So there's really 4 books from which I teach. It's like Atomic Habits, No More Mr. Nice Guy, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and Psycho-Cybernetics. Those are all great books. So I would suggest any of those. But to kind of get to the place where you give less of a shit, read The Subtle Art. It's very good. Anxious. What about more unconscious people pleasing? Constant. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I forgot to mention those things. Jacob, you just wrote me a whole nother thing in the course where you're like, yeah. If you want to, I'll tell you a little joke about this, which is kind of funny to me anyway. You guys noticed at the end of all my videos on Instagram and TikTok. I hope this helps. That actually came from my friend Marcus Elliott, who's a very talented musician in Detroit. Shout out to him. And he and I were in a coaching course together. And I was really irritated. And he's like, we had to make these videos. And he's like, you should give like a really snarky thumbs up at the end. And I was like, that was how that started. Because it was like the ultimate in what people pleasing was, right? So I was at a men's retreat recently, and I asked my friends to call me out on that. Like if they notice I'm laughing at my own jokes, or I'm laughing inconsistently, to call me out. And that helped a lot. So maybe that's something you could work with other people. Psycho-Cybernetics was the 4th book, Jen. Yes, Seth, you're absolutely, or Giselle, you're absolutely right on this. So this afternoon, we're going to need to look at what's on the agenda here. I think we have 2 more to go because we've done boundaries. So we have 2 more today. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm getting tired. So tomorrow might be a little shorter. So I'm going to take one more quick break, stand up, stretch out, and we're going to finish this next hour up. I'll be putting these courses, I'll put the course into a video this afternoon, and we'll figure it out. So thanks, Seth. I also didn't sleep last night because I don't know if you guys were here at the beginning, but I was talking really, really fast because I was super, super nervous. So Seth's like, do squats, like push-ups and shit. Like, geez, homie. Didn't know I was going to get a personal trainer out of this today. So I will be right back, guys. I'm just going to turn off everything. Let myself center back in, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right. And we're back. Okay. Here we go. Let's get that quick break thing off there. Okay. Here we go. I mean, gonna try to repeat it tomorrow. I mean, I'll be here. I don't know how much energy I'll have. This was exhausting. Um, even my Boundary Boot Camp doesn't take this much bandwidth. So, but I'm ready to get back in. All right. You guys are awesome. Yeah, if Mark gets 1,000 comments like, hey, let's get Nick on the show. That would be cool. I do have a book coming out myself. So you're going to want to be on my mailing list if you're not already. If you want to get the pre-release of that, it's going to be very, very cool. I'm excited about it. Much love to my homie, Jeff Goins, who's helping me get all that done, and his team. So, I am endlessly blessed to have people around me that care about me and my success. I want to thank my oldest boy, Kai, today. He made me a sandwich while I was doing this. What a good kid. So this will all be on YouTube, by the way, guys. So if you want to access this video, it will be saved to YouTube. I'm not going to take it down. I'm also going to post it in the course. I will also email links again to the course to make sure that you all can get into that. So all that said, here we go. Right? My brain just stopped working. What am I doing? Ah, here we go. Oh, I got to take that down. All right. As we were, let's talk about how to increase our self-confidence. First, we have to define what confidence in self is. Okay. So back to my screen. We see what's in the next slide here. There we go. So I'm going to teach you what self-confidence means, right? So pretend. Actually, don't pretend. I'm just going to write it. What does it mean to be confident? Right? Confidence equals trust. Self equals you. Well, me in this case. The question then becomes, do I trust me? Trust in self. That's it. That is self-confidence. Okay. Do you trust that you will do what you say you are going to do? If you don't trust what you say you're going to do, then you are out of integrity and out of alignment with who you want to be. And that is where things get screwed up, right? I'm very surprised. I haven't used the many curse words in this today, so yeah. But as we go into this, right? So when we look at the ability to increase our self-confidence, we have to have a feeling of trust in our own abilities and judgment, right? Confidence equals trust. Do you trust that you will do what you say you're going to do? So the first thing you want to do is cultivate a list of proof and collect data of times when you proved you could trust yourself. I want to show you something that's very interesting. If you take, and by the way, guys, this exercise here is not listed, I don't think, as an exercise in the coursework. So this is one I'm just taking, shooting from the hip on, right? It's one that I do with my clients a lot, right? So the first thing you want to do is take a memory of pain. So a painful memory, right? Painful memory. Let me put this up on screen. Okay, so take a painful memory. Okay, and you're going to write a column. Okay, then I want you to write. I don't have enough room on this board. Hang on. How fascinating. Painful memory. Okay, got a painful memory. Then we have, what did I feel? Okay, so let's say a recent one I heard was took my truck, right? Took truck. Sad, angry, hurt, whatever. Okay, put the emotion there, right? Write down, what did I learn? Okay, this is what did I learn as an adult, right? What can this teach me? Okay, so maybe what did I learn or teach me? Now, not later. Okay, so or not before, right? Because the painful memories of before, the lessons they teach you are often not great, right? So what can this teach me now? Okay, and then what does it prove about me? And then write down, what does it prove about me? Okay. What you're going to do, if you do this long enough, let's say you do 10 of these, right? What you'll see is that you have a stack of undeniable proof of your own strength, of your own tenacity, of your own resilience. Okay. You are going to write proof that you are already who you say you are. Let's say it's, I want to be strong. I want to know that I'm resilient. I want to know that I'm going to be okay. Well, everything you've led up to in this point, every single bad thing that's ever happened to you, you've survived. You've literally survived 100% of your bad days. So if you've survived 100% of your bad days, you already have a stack of undeniable proof that you're kind of a badass. So one of the keys to understanding self-confidence is to look at and celebrate your wins, because through that arc of a story, let's say you go out and you want to get fit, right? Every day in your journal, you write down, I went to the gym today, or I ate right today, or I tracked my calories today, right? If you do that, what you're doing is stacking proof that, oh, I'm a person that goes to the gym. Or if you set boundaries with somebody every day, or not set boundaries with somebody, but if you assert yourself every day, you write down, I asserted myself in this way today. Even if you didn't assert yourself in all the ways, write down the one way that you did, right? Because you need to cultivate an entire list of why you are awesome, right? The next step is you need to look at and cultivate this list of how have you betrayed yourself, right? And your self-confidence. Cultivate an entire list of areas or times when you betrayed yourself and your self-confidence. Okay. What you have to do then, this is very important, okay, is rather than going to a place where you say, I should have done this, okay, don't should yourself to death. What you're trying to do is say, how would I have preferred to react, right? You're going from, we're now delineating the difference between reaction and response. Okay. How would I choose to respond rather than react? Okay. Looking back, if I do this, what would it look like if I respond appropriately? Okay. That response narrative is really important, because what you're doing is teaching your brain to think differently. And this is going to be a process over time. Right? And Iris, to the question you just asked me, I am literally showing you verbatim how to self-validate, right? And are you going to want a second opinion? Yes, you do not need a second opinion, right? Wants and needs are very different, right? You do not need that. You want that, but you're not going to go get that. You are going to be the source energy of all of this, right? So, all that said, Alice, I'm not sure I understand if this is a question, but we'll talk more about it. There's more to this, okay? So, going back to the point, sorry, I got distracted. My brain's a little tired. When you take this list of shoulds, or all of these things that you feel like you may have done differently or done wrong, and that you would like to do better, right? You write preference, and then you imagine how that would look. What would the impact be on your life if you were to respond differently, or you had responded differently then, and you imagine yourself doing it, right? You're practicing in real time, or in kind of delayed time rather. You're practicing the art of allowing yourself to grow, right? Because what you practice is what you will become. Okay, I cannot stress this enough. You get good at anything you practice, including not practicing. It's absolutely vital that you understand that. Okay, so this is the practice session. This is where you go, okay, how would I respond in a perfect world, right? The opposite, so going back to the idea in the beginning, that the opposite of being a people pleaser is being a jerk, right? Which is why we're not going toward the opposite. We're going from people pleaser to resistance, right? We are resisting this temptation, right? Then we go from that to self-awareness, and then from there we go to integrated, right? So what you're trying to do is integrate the parts of your personality. And that's what this whole stretch is, right? Is understanding where the memory was, what did it feel like, what did you learn, and then what does it prove about me, right? So, Sophia, you might feel, this is an interesting question. Is it possible that starting this, our confidence goes down before it goes up? You might feel a negative emotion, but that doesn't mean your confidence goes down. Okay. You might feel uncomfortable, but that is not a lack of confidence. It's just a feeling. Right? It's like the monster under your bed. It's probably not there. Right? But when you look at this metric here, when I talk about the opposite of people pleasing, remember this is a process that takes time, right? You can do this by yourself. You don't need me. I will help you if you ask me to, right? I am there to teach you in classes. I'm there to teach you now, right? But remember, you can do this by yourself. You have all the energy you need. Okay. So one of the things you can do to help yourself become more compassionate is write a letter. Okay. So take this pain or that stress, write a letter to yourself describing the situation, and then address yourself with the same compassion and understanding you would give to your friend or one of your children, somebody that you truly love, right? Acknowledge your feelings and remind yourself that it's okay to make mistakes and experience difficulty. Okay, this is a very powerful exercise. I write a lot of letters to myself, especially when I'm in a bad headspace. So use this tool, trust me, okay? Positive self-talk is something that I don't harp on, but I talk a lot about, right? When you notice that you're talking to yourself like shit, you need to pause and reframe it, right? Instead of like, I can't believe how bad I screwed this up. It's okay to say, I made a mistake. People do that, right? And then just ask yourself, what does it look like to learn from this experience, right? Not what can I learn always, what does it look like to learn from this experience? How can I grow from this? And I know that this sounds kind of woo-woo, personal growthy, but at the end of the day, some of the stuff that they talk about in the personal growth world works. And this is one of those things, right? Giselle, she says, prepare for all of the crying. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. If you ask Mark, my courses can be a little challenging. So that all said, these are just ideas that you can have. It again, I don't think that positive reinforcement is shouting affirmations at yourself in the mirror. It's developing. It's proof stacking. Like Who do I want to be? And am I actually moving toward being that? And as you progress and as you get better, you'll have more and more proof over time. Right. Another way to get self-confident is to engage in self-care. Right. And by self-care, by the way, guys, when I say self-care, I don't mean going to an ashram and smudging yourself with sage and being blessed by a shaman. Right. I'm sure there's a good amount of ayahuasca and drugs you can do to, self-care. But really all this boils down to is, are you exercising? Are you eating healthy food? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you spending time in nature? Are you doing things you enjoy? Right. And when you think about prioritizing your self-care routines, they are what makes you feel valued. They are what validates you. So back to the question of how do I self-validate? It's by caring for yourself. It's going to the dentist. It's standing up for yourself. It's balancing your boundaries, right? It's working through integration and trying to figure out, what does it look like to be this new version of me? If I was going to invent me, how would I do it? So the more you build on that, the more the relationship with yourself gets better, right? So Morgan wrote this. She is pretty impressive with her drawings, right? So when we look at going from darkness to light, right, we all start in the same place, right? It's this pain and lack of clarity that we have, right? And as this tree grows, it develops these roots. And those are the experiences that we take, right? Those are all of our experiences, and we put them into this root system, right? And it grounds us into this, right? And allows the muck and the dirt to be and to draw our strength from it, right? As the tree grows, it breaks through, and that's where we start to learn and we start to grow. And we start to become more actualized, right? Which then brings us to the place where we have all of the fruit and all of the growth that we've been cultivating over that time, right? But it takes time to grow trees. It takes time to grow everything, right? This isn't going to be something you do overnight. You've been living the same way for decades. And if you're living decades in the same way, to think that you can change it in a moment is absolutely absurd. You can change whole pieces in a moment, but you can't change the whole of you in a moment. So remember that every root you drop, everything you learn, every pain that you gather and you put into a framework of, how can I benefit from this? What can I learn from this? How can I even serve other people through this, right? Gets you closer to that breakthrough and finding your own meaning. I really like this graphic. I'm going to tell Morgan you guys all like this graphic. Is that cool with you? Yes. All right, good. I'm going to do it anyway. I don't have any answers, but I'm doing it anyway. Which brings us to the final section of the day. How do we strengthen our assertiveness skills? Right? We need to understand some differences before we get there. Okay. Actually, I'll just use the thing because I'm tired. So when we're assertive, we're going to notice a couple of things about ourselves. We're going to be expressing our thoughts and feelings clearly. We're going to be very direct. We're going to be very honest. We're going to be very respectful, right? Assertive people stand up for their rights, and they do it while we're respecting others, right? Direct communication and respect for others are characteristics of this. So when you in this world, what you're doing is accepting a lot of responsibility inside of being assertive. And that brings us to, how do we do that in terms of showing up, right? Well, we have to be more confident in expressing our feelings and our opinions, but not overbearing, right? We have to use open body language. Like if I sat here like this all day talking to you guys, you probably wouldn't even want to listen to me, right? In fact, if I know people pleasers, me just crossing my chest and lowering my voice a little bit is probably making everybody uncomfortable, right? You pleasers, you. All right. So opening your body language is really a valuable exercise, which is just when you have to have a challenging conversation, just sit and be like mindful, put your feet on the ground, again, ground to your position, be where your feet are, open your body language and communicate, right? Allow you to be, right? people who have positive self-esteem, who like themselves, they have a very high level of confidence in their communication. It reflects in all of their interactions, right? So examples of asserting behaviors or assertive behavior, like saying no to unreasonable requests without feeling guilty, right? Expressing appreciation for criticism, especially when it's done constructively. By the way, people pleasers hate criticism. Every single one of you. I know, I've seen me do it, right? And then asking for help. This is such a big one, right? Show me a people pleaser and I'll show you somebody that doesn't know how to ask for help, right? And the benefits of this are innumerable, but some of the main ones are like better relationships, better self-esteem, higher self-confidence. You'll have much less anxiety from holding back your feelings, right? Because remember, guys, what you suppress what you repress will eventually express itself in some other way. So there's the old adage about help. What's that? Oh, right. Well, I mean, technically, Poppy Denver, you are asking for help by simply being here. So that should make you really uncomfortable. Hooray. Right. So now we've moved into the passivity section, right? So we want to be assertive. We do not want to be passive, right? I'll let you guys go through this part, but basically what passivity boils down to is conflict avoidance, lack of self-expression, apologetic behavior, and very often that there's little to no eye contact at all, okay, in communication. I'm tired of this ticker. I'm taking it off. So all of those lead to less confidence and self-esteem, which is why they're so insidious, right? So I can send the deck. Yeah, I'll send the deck tonight, probably right now. So that's funny that you said that because I just took that off there. Right. So the characteristics, one of the characteristics of being passive is often passive aggression, right? Where we say what we say are hurt, but we say it in a way that nobody can hear it. Right. Which is basically a really shitty way of doing things. Okay. This is where okay. So my brains we can probably do that. We know what the drawbacks are. Okay. But I want to move into aggressiveness because this is on the same through line that we've talked about, where people pleasing to being a jerk is to become aggressive, right? When you say being a jerk, what you're talking about is violating the rights of others, and trying to dominate or control other people, right? Interestingly enough, both people pleasing, nice guy syndrome, people pleasing / nice guy syndrome, and being a jerk are the same behavioral tactic used differently. We are all trying to exercise control, right? We are trying to control the world around us to fit a specific narrative that we like. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work, right? So dominating behavior, blaming, criticizing, intimidating body language, disrespecting other people, and overconfidence, these always show up with somebody who's aggressive, right? We know what the drawbacks are. I'm not going to put you through that, right? So the reason we prefer assertiveness is because it strikes a balance between that passive and aggressive. It's the only time that really that kind of line works, right? But I tend to believe that when we go back to, I tend toward this idea, which is like passive people pleasing, and aggressive jerk. And that's it, right? We have passive, we have people pleasing, aggressive, we have jerk. Right? You guys are probably starting to notice that I go back to the same graph a lot, right? Because again, we want to go up the ladder, okay? To integration. We're trying to go up line here to, in this case, assertive. Because what does it mean to be assertive? Jesus, that's terrible. Hang on. what does it mean to be assertive? Right? It means that we ask to get our needs met. We ask for what we need. We ask for help. We help others when we feel we can. We are genuine. We are authentic. We are in our own power. Right? We're fully integrated. Right? Will you always be fully integrated? No, but a good chunk of the time, you're going to feel like you are. Right? Laura, looks like I got a question. What about when it feels like people don't let you speak or speak over you? I notice that's happening more and more, so my voice shrinks. First and foremost, I would mention to people that you feel that way. Like, hey, ouch! I feel like I'm not being heard. Are you meaning to do that? Going back to the original model from this morning, right? Ouch! I feel like I'm not being heard. Are you meaning to do that? No, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize you felt like that. Okay. Here's what I'm trying to say. Well, you're being too sensitive. Okay. Well, then I'm going to stop talking. And then you just walk away from the conversation. Right. See how that works? Right. Raina's got another. Right. Did you mean to do that? Keep going. Did you mean to talk over me? Right. No, Jesus. I'm really sorry. Get the point? So remember, assertive exists on this line. Assertive, kind, discipline, joy, love. You can put anything up there. Great sex, doesn't matter, right? That's the deal. Going back to this. This is why we prefer assertiveness, okay? It allows you the ability when you become more assertive, and this takes time, by the way. It allows you to start to integrate the parts of your personality that you really want, right? And it creates in you relationships of mutual respect and enhances those interactions, right? Remember that boundaries and lack of people pleasing are about allowing people to get close to you, right? Boundaries let people in as much as they keep people out. So, how do we become more assertive, right? We practice self-awareness by understanding our own needs, things like we've talked about today. Expressing your thoughts and feelings using I statements. I hate I statements in many regard, but they're so valuable, right? Like, I need a minute to process this information, right? Hey, do you want to go out to lunch? I need a minute to answer that, right? I feel like that invalidated me, or that comment invalidated what I was saying, or I'm feeling overspoken, or I'm feeling like I have no voice, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Hopefully that's all making sense. Hang on. I see a comment. I don't know what it is. Chris Hussey, it's his. Jefferson Fisher. I don't know. I'm looking back for that. I don't know. All right, doesn't matter. So, learning to say no, maintaining eye contact, and staying calm, right? Keeping your emotions in check. And this is interesting because as you start your boundary journey, you're going to get a little fluffier in terms of your emotions. Oh, okay, got it. I really like Jeff Fisher, by the way. Another one that I like. If you guys aren't watching Jimmy on Relationships, he's become a friend of mine. And Mike Pridgeon, who I don't know if you're here, Mikey, but I hope you are. The staying calm part is really important, and there's a trick to this, right? Very often, when somebody bumps up against one of our boundaries or hurts our feelings, we tend to get angry pretty quickly, right? And that happens even with me, right? So what I do now is different than what I used to do, which was either pin it up or swallow it and then express it later in an explosive way or by getting drunk. Now, instead, I just simply say, hey, I'm getting angry. I feel myself getting angry. I'm going to take a break from this conversation. So, Mr. Mike Pridgeon, if you're here, somebody says that you're tremendous. By the way, if you're interested in the Boundary Boot Camp, Mike Pridgeon is going to be joining us for a very special session in that as well. It's going to be really cool. So shameless plug. Anyhow, moving on. So it looks like, wow, I did almost the entire thing today. So tomorrow I'm going to have to do more. So tomorrow we're going to talk about taking control because I went through assertiveness today. So take that, you guys. What I'd like to do, is there anybody? No? All right. So that's pretty much all I've got for the day, guys. I almost went through the entire 2-day course in a day and a half here. But what I would like to do is spend the next 30 minutes answering a few more questions. I do have to get these emails put together this afternoon, and I'll get those out to you in the coming hours as soon as I can get all this done. What I think I'll probably do is I'll just send out the video to everyone. I may have it transcribed. I may not. I haven't figured out how to do any of that yet. But I will do what I can. So that said, are there any questions that I can answer for you today? Briefly, because I'm starting to get tired. We're glad you could make it when you got here, buddy. Enjoy going through it. It should be a lot of fun. Any tactics for dealing with negative emotions that come up mid-conversation? If it's your emotions, not really, actually, not really, other than taking a break. If it's a particularly large conversation, if it's one that's getting really heated, it's actually a very loving thing to do, to take a break, which is to say, hey, we're really getting heated and it's making me uncomfortable and I don't want to say anything I won't mean. So what I think the best way to handle this is for us to let's go to separate corners and take 10 minutes and let's come back and talk about this in that timeline. Right? One of the things I would say is if you're going to take a break from a conversation, don't leave it on a cliffhanger. Say, I will come back to this in 15 minutes. Right. So that will make a huge difference in how you show up. And I think I will start tomorrow with a little bit of a recap over what we covered. And then tonight I will send out the emails. I'll probably send out most of the slide deck too. And I'll get everybody re-invited to the actual course. It says it sent it out to 1,500 people, so I don't know why it didn't. But all that said, if there are no other questions, I'm going to call it an early one. I'm going to go and take an Advil because I've been talking so long and my voice is starting to go. Shelly, I see you. Hold on. I'm going to answer your question. I've cut off my sister and my mom the last month. I would like to resolve the conflict. What might be the best way to approach the conversation? First, I would ask if they want to have the conversation. Like if they don't want to talk about it, then there's really nothing you can do. So, I would ask that, like, do they want to have the conversation? If they don't want to have the conversation, then don't have it. So, and I'm going to turn off TikTok. Bye, guys. If you want to join us tomorrow, do it on the IG. I was on live TikTok for 4 hours. Looks like I did not do very well over there. Hope this helps. A lot of what you're talking about seems to be absolute honesty to yourself. I will say this to you. If you want to know the cornerstones of the things that I teach in the Boundary Boot Camp, it all boils down to honesty. It all boils down to honesty. I've dealt with cutting off my 92-year-old dad. What if he passes before he asks to reconcile? What if he doesn't ask to reconcile? My question is, he's 92. Can you create a relationship with him that doesn't require the emotional bandwidth? Right. The thing that we have to do part of this with our parents is like, unless they're really, really narcissistic, is you have to be willing to meet them where they're at. And it's okay to love somebody and not emotionally engage, right? You have to become more of a conscientious observer of their behavior. And when they start to act in ways that are, incongruous to who you want to be, then you just have to step away from that. It's more about boundaries than it's about whether or not you engage. Yeah, I would love to see that. Tammy, would you forward that to Nick at nickpollard.com? I'm curious where it came from so I can send it to everyone so they can find it. Like, if you guys have the link that we sent you, or one of you, if you would email it to me, Nick at nickpollard.com, just forward me the email, and I'll forward it out to everybody so they can find it. So Daisy, this is the example of what not to do. Actually, my ex would just go to bed during an argument, leaving me fuming for hours. How do we deal when they just dip out? I would say I am not opposed to taking a break from this conversation, but we need to be able to come back to it in 15 minutes. And frankly, that's kind of an abusive thing to do. Like, I mean, maybe not abusive, but it's a passive aggressive, manipulative thing to do. So, okay, my friends, I am going to call it a day. Thank you so much for showing up. You'll get an email from me about Boundary Boot Camp. We're launching that sales site again this week. I'm excited to have everybody that signs up for that. I've really enjoyed today. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for making me feel special. See ya.